Yeah.
The video is a live stream on.
Yeah. Good evening all to tonight's planning committee. First item of the agenda is the election of chair. Could I invite nominations for chair, please?
I nominate Councillor Lawrence Fourweathers.
Any seconder? Any other nominations? Yeah.
Councillor Mary Clarkson, I nominate.
And I'm happy to second.
Any other nominations? As there is more than one nomination, those nominated may briefly tell the committee if they wish why they would like to be chair. Would either nominee like to do so? Yeah.
Thank you as well. Colleagues, I'm standing as chair of planning because I think we need a new perspective for the work of the Oxford City Planning Committee. I've been a member of the committee for 4 years now, and in that time I've learned a lot about the planning process and of course the infamous NPPF, which I know many of you find frustrating at times. There are of course changes to planning in which the Labour government are introducing, and some may say inflicting, and which may affect us. We remain to see the details of this. If elected, I'll endeavour to make the committee more connected to the process and make decisions with more knowledge, particularly of large developments. How will I do this? I'll work with the planning officers to hold more informal briefings as laid down in the Council's Constitution, section 24.14, which I feel has not been used enough in the 4 years that I've served on the committee. I'll also encourage more use of site visits when planning officers carry these out. This is to ensure that committee members have a better feel for potentially contentious applications or where understanding of the application can be enhanced by seeing the site in question. Thank you for listening, and I hope you will see a difference if I'm elected as chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I have been chair of this committee before. I think it's worth emphasising the importance of us all understanding the planning framework and the constraints within which we work and making that clear at committee. While we may have disagreements with the NPPF and with what the government is proposing, nevertheless, we have to be fully aware of and work within both our local plan policies and the NPPF, and I will ascertain to do that and make sure that all members of the planning committee understand our responsibilities and that planning has that there is a preference, there is a sort of presumption to approve planning applications. And while we should rightly challenge and bring local knowledge to bear, it is important that we do bear that in mind and that we follow that guidance. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I remind committee members you can only vote for one nominee? So for councillor whoever, can all in favour please show? And for councillor Clarkson? Councillor Clarkson voted as chair for the next year. Thank you. Now we repeat the same process for vice chair. Could I invite nominations for vice chair, please?
Well, I can.
Yeah. Okay. Any seconder?
Lawrence can.
Yeah, I'm not second.
Oh,
Well,
any seconder for councillor Altaf Khan?
No,
No,
me.
Lawrence.
I
Oh.
suppose Lawrence.
Oh, okay. And any seconder for councillor whoever? Any more nominations?
I'll second councillor Power there.
Okay. Any other nominations? Okay, councillor whoever is the vice chair for the next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I now start with apologies for absence and any substitutions?
yeah, I'm here substituting on behalf of Louise Upton.
You're half of Louise Upton.
On behalf of Louise
sorry.
Upton.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, for that.
Yeah, don't be so self-deprecating, councillor Chapman. Fine, okay. And no other, I think we've got a full house, haven't we? Yes, okay. And do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor
For item 22, for the, I'm not going to read it out, for plot 27, I'm on Lismore Parish Council, which did comment on this application. I was not part of that process and approached this one with an open mind. And for the Blackbird Leys Community Centre, it's kind of a non-direct declaration of interest. I am currently a cabinet member, but the sort of decisions around this were taken in 2020 before I was a councillor. So.
Okay, thank you. Was there any more? Councillor Regisford.
Thank you. For the item regarding Blackbird Leys Community Centre, I think it's a non-direct declaration of interest right now. I have previously worked there through various projects, etc., and I'm highly likely to work there again once everything has been completed. So just to let everybody know that.
You have no financial
No
interest at all?
financial
No, that's
interest,
great.
no.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay. I know Councillor Hollingsworth.
I have previously worked there through.
Sorry, was that my speaking machine? I was going to say in relation to item, is it 9, isn't it? The Blackbird Leys Community Centre. I am currently a cabinet member and have in the past been a cabinet member which has talked about issues broadly relating to the Blackbird Leys regeneration project. I have had no engagement with the preparation for this planning application, and therefore I believe I do not have any conflict of interest. If officers advise me that I do, that will be the first they have done so far, but I would be happy to withdraw if that was their view. But I don't think that I have such interests which are conflicting.
Ross here has indicated that he's happy with that and that you don't have an interest.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, ditto.
Can I ask a question? And this isn't about one of the planning applications. It's on the Heritage Asset Register, which is item 10. I have been supportive of the first one, the new Marston Meadows, which lies within my ward. Is that an interest? We don't often have, it's quite unusual, we don't often have these. I have no pecuniary interest at all, but it's purely as a ward council, I've been supportive of this. Okay, I think we'll return to that. Okay, it's good to see a lot of members of the public here tonight. This is it's a meeting in public rather than a public meeting, if you understand what I mean. It is being live streamed, and if anyone wants to record, you are perfectly willing to do so, but we'd be grateful if you could just inform us in advance. Okay, thank you. We will now move on to item 5, which is 195 Botley Road, and I'll hand over to Felicity Byrne. Thank you.
Just sharing the screen, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. This application is on the Botley Road, sits within the Oxford Botley Road Retail Park in the west of the city. It's out of town shopping centre area, retail park. It sits on the corner of Laymarsh Road and Botley Road, and I'm showing you a photograph of the site from Botley Road. Opposite houses on Botley Road. Specific neighbour, which I can return to, 192 Botley Road. The view down Laymarsh Road towards Hinksey Meadows at the bottom. You've got the existing retail and commercial units on the left-hand side. Frontage showing the existing 1990s portal frame buildings, and down again towards the west, and the houses opposite, adjacent to the rear of the site within the Botley Road Retail Park, and the relationship of the existing building to its immediate adjacent neighbour, which is number 199 Botley Road, and the existing footpath, cycle path that runs down between the two properties down to the existing retail park at the back, and looking back up that cycle path. From Laymarsh Road, then looking back towards the site, and you can see the shared car parking that's for all the retail units that are accessed off this access from Laymarsh Road. And looking to the left of this photograph, you can see the existing units, which are part of item 6, next on the agenda, under the same ownership as the applicant for this site. And this particular view is where the access road would be adjusted to at this point in front of the units on the left-hand side. Just showing you the existing site plan, therefore. The site is outlined in red on your screen in front of you, and the blue below shows the ownership of the other properties on the retail park. You can see the wide area of 242 car parking spaces in that area. And then just showing you the proposed site plan. The development is set out as 2 L-shaped interlocking buildings known as A1 and A2. In this image, A1 is to your left-hand side, and it's the lower of the 2 buildings, and A2 is to the right-hand side. Just showing you existing elevations, therefore, and proposed elevations. North and east, north facing Botley Road on the top of that screen, and you can see clearly A2, which is 5 stories plus plant, and A1, which is 4 stories plus plant. South and west elevation. The lower image in that slide shows you the west elevation that would face onto 199 Botley Road. And CGI images of, oh, hello. Don't know what happened there, sorry. Of the proposed development, again, A2 to your left-hand side and A1 to your right. Along the Botley Road, and left-hand slide shows the proposed commercial event space on the ground floor, and and the right-hand slide shows the publicly accessible courtyard space. And this slide shows you the new relationship between A1 and number 199 Botley Road. Just take you through some the floor plans. It's a flexible research and development floor plan. And as I said, the yellow is the events social space, which would be separate from the rest of the development. To the left-hand side, you can see the combined shared cycle storage, which is covered and accessible from within the building itself for staff from A2 and A1. And to the bottom of that left-hand slide, you can see 2 parking spaces. So that is a significant reduction in car parking, 240 spaces. First floor plan, second, third, fourth on the right-hand side, and the roof plant of A1 on the left-hand side, and the roof plant as proposed. And again, the roof plant. This is showing the overall landscape plan, which actually shows the next item at the bottom of this slide. Is a combined high-quality landscape designed reflecting the Hinksey Meadows in terms of biodiversity plants and general landscaping. It has informal play within it and also elements of public art. As you will see in the report, the development is high quality and would generate a net increase of approximately 1,282 jobs. It would positively enhance Oxford's post-pandemic growth and global reputation by doing so. In terms of the existing uses as shops and concerns about the loss of shops, we must be mindful of the fact that these existing units now fall under Class E, and as such, they could be converted to research and development use within that use class without requiring planning permission. As we know from other proposals that have been completed, the Fabrica, which I showed you a slide of the footpath down to, which was former Argos, which was converted and extended. And we also have 135 Botley Road, which is known as Mission Street, and that was approved last year and is under construction now for R&D use. The principle, therefore, of R&D use in this location is acceptable. It also would make best use of redevelopment of brownfield land, which is given significant weight now by the MPPF. Whilst the height is above the guidelines set out in the Botley Road development brief, officers consider that on balance there are significant public benefits arising from this development, including the generation of new jobs and other material considerations set out below, including contributions to public transport and other transport contributions. In long distance views, which I'll come to, we have identified that there would be some harm, and I'll just show you some of the verified views of the application. Looking on the Botley Road as you come over the bridge from the railway station, this is the existing view and the proposed view of the new development. And then they have also included Mission Street, which pops up in front of it. Again, from the other end, from coming from Botley itself, existing and proposed view. As I mentioned, it would be visible on high level views, and we have rigorously looked at this. And in these views, as I just flick through, it's very difficult to see in these small slides, but the development would pop up. We have asked them to amend the materials to minimise and mitigate the impact in these views. And they have also, this shows a cumulative view with the Mission Street, which pops up in front of this site particularly. Again, from Carfax Tower, existing and proposed views. If I just flick through. Got St Michael at the North Gate, right in the centre of that view behind the spire. And then Hinksey Meadows proposed, and with the Mission Street in there. Whilst there would be harm caused to the setting of Oxford and its central conservation area due to the height and the way in which the buildings obscure the ability to see the green trees that line the bifurcated rivers that come through and form what historically and tell us about the history and how Oxford was brought about in the first place. We consider that the public benefits set out in the committee report outweigh this harm in this case. Whilst it would be visible from other views, we consider taking account of the warehouse buildings as they stand. We consider that the impact would not be significant. In turning to other matters, it is within flood zone 1, and most of the building is within flood zone 1. There's a small area on the eastern edge, which falls within flood zones 2 and 3. The information demonstrates that it would not cause unacceptable flooding elsewhere, and with a suitable drainage strategy, the LLFA raises no objection. Sustainable drainage systems would be provided also. The area surrounding is flood zone 3, and therefore they will provide and have provided a flood evacuation plan, which makes us confident that should it be surrounded by flood water, people will be alerted to that and safely evacuated. And on that basis, it's acceptable. In terms of parking, I highlighted before that there'd be a significant reduction in car parking and therefore trips to the site, which is welcomed by us and the County Council. Sufficient cycle parking is provided, 252 spaces in all. There would be no adverse impact on highway in terms of traffic generation. And subject to conditions, and due to the fact that it is mostly car-free except for the 2 spaces, the county have requested contributions towards improved bus services through public transport contributions, improvements to the Botley Road itself, including improvements to pedestrian and cycleways, and improvements because of the fact that there would be an increase in people movements to and from both from this railway station itself. They have asked for contributions towards improved real-time information down at the railway station, and also improved cycle parking provision there for the interim. And these contributions have been accepted by the applicant. in order to make sure that people also use can find the site and to and from the railway station, but also make healthy choices and find their way using alternative, quieter routes to the city centre for staff and visitors and also residents locally. The City Council have identified the need for a wayfinding strategy and wayfinding hardware, signposts, fingerposts, etc. And a contribution has been asked for that, supported by the County Council, and this has been accepted by the applicant. Just turning now to other matters which relate to impact on residential amenity. As you will note from the report, there has been concern about the impact on residents in terms of overbearing and overlooking issues and loss of light. Officers are satisfied that in this case, looking ahead at 199 Botley Road, that when taking into account the relationship of the existing building to the proposed, that there'd be no significant increase in an overbearing impact than currently exists. In addition, there'd be a satisfactory separation distance of approximately 25 metres, together with a whole line of tree planting that would line along that footpath, as you can see illustrated in the slide in front of you. In addition, the element of the building closest to the house, all the windows would be fritted, which is obscure glass at the bottom to prevent direct overlooking, together with angled fins to angle any views away should you be able to actually see out of the windows. So officers are content that overlooking is mitigated and overbearing impact is not significant in this case. In relation to the properties opposite, the sunlight daylight assessments have demonstrated satisfactorily that there'd be no significant loss of sunlight or daylight to the properties opposite, in particular 192 Botley Road. They would still maintain satisfactory sunlight in accordance with the BRE guidance. And whilst there would be a small loss of sunlight to a bedroom, this is not considered significant because it is a bedroom and because of the way it's used as a bedroom. It's not the main living room. In relation to photovoltaics, officers have asked them to assess the impact on the photovoltaics. This is a material consideration in the way in which it contributes towards the renewable energy systems and mitigates against climate change. The assessment, initial assessment done in accordance with the BRE guidance shows that the PVs would not be significantly impacted. They would have less than 10%, and the BRE guidance says that this is satisfactory. Anything over 10% would be a cause for concern. Notwithstanding that, our view is that a material consideration is that whilst these PVs might have a small impact between 0 to 7.4%, I think it is, reduction in their ability to generate electricity and therefore contribute towards the renewable energy systems and therefore help mitigate against climate change. The proposed development would actually in itself generate a considerable amount more, a larger amount of renewable energies by virtue of the large number of photovoltaics on the top of the buildings, and therefore in this case outweigh any small decrease in their ability in this case. And therefore officers are satisfied that the development is acceptable. Just turning then to biodiversity, as I've shown you, the landscape plan is comprehensive and well thought through. It would generate net gain on site of 176%. So the new building would be set back from the Botley Road, allowing for new improved landscaping to an enhanced public realm for Botley Road and the residents. It's set back approximately 12 metres from the boundary. And it would include new tree planting and low-level shrub planting. And as I mentioned before, there is to be a series of approximately 4 new pieces of public art that would sit, one along the Botley Road in front of the access into the courtyard there that you can see, and others throughout the courtyard so that people can find and move in and through the space towards the rear site. In conclusion then, officers are of the view that taking all material considerations into account, on balance, this application is acceptable in accordance with the NPPF and the local plan, subject to appropriate worded conditions and subject to the financial contributions set out in section 3 of the committee report, and we recommend approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now we have 2 speakers against and 3 in favour. Could the 2 speakers against come forward, please? You'll have 5 minutes in which to make your case. 5 minutes between the 2 of you, so, okay. When you're ready, thank you.
As you can see on this slide, this is the proposed development. Just to be able to see this development, to demolish the whole of the Botley Road and stand in the water meadows well behind it. So it is actually very misleading as to what it would look like from the Botley Road. It would actually look like a very nicely glazed canyon. Each story, it's 5 and 6 stories high, including the rather revolting grey power items on the top. Each story is much larger than a domestic story to accommodate the laboratories. This height is exacerbated by the fact that the Environment Agency has asked for it to be lifted up above ground, standard ground level as it is at the moment. So it's actually going to make things even worse. This is all because this development has completely ignored your development brief for this area. It's driven a coach and horses through the height regulation. Do you really want to allow this development to go ahead? Lots of developers are looking at this so that they can also drive their coaches and horses through any development brief that you produce in the future. It is a precedent that I really feel you should not be setting. You may have missed the announcement that the Oxford Flood Alleviation Scheme has passed its final hurdle. And when it is built, this area will no longer be in a floodplain. And it could therefore be a very, very good place to put housing, which is particularly vital for Oxford. The workers that are going to occupy other of these buildings, which are more to the west of Oxford, are going to need somewhere to live. It would be a wonderful place for those workers and for the essential workers, nurses, teachers, and other workers to live. The development's got cycling spaces for about 250 bikes, 2 disabled car parking spaces, so 1,000 workers are going to come some other way. Some of them, let's say 500 come by train or by bus, 500 are going to come by car. They'll park in the Seacourt Park and Ride when it's not flooded, which it is for 1, 2, 3 months of every year since it has been developed. So where will they park then? That is, I think, a consideration that you need to take into account. More worrying on a personal, but also on an Oxford City Council's trying to conserve energy, is that for the 3 months from mid-October to mid-February, the houses to the north of this development will have no direct sunlight whatsoever. This is well within the regulations However, it does mean that all of those houses will have to use an awful lot more energy. My time's up.
Councillor Monaghan, yeah, sorry, thanks.
Thank you. Just to preface my objections to say we have a housing crisis in Oxford and almost full employment. The local plan should have allocated this site to housing, not employment. But let's hope the next local plan delivers more homes. On a positive, it's great that there are only 2 parking spaces on this new development. That, you know, we're very grateful for that. And the public square looks really good. And the biodiversity net gain is excellent. So thank you, developers, for all of that. On heights, the document that this contravenes is the Botley Road Retail Park TAN, the technical advice note, published only 3 years ago in 2022. 8.6 in that says that the height should respect local sensitivities. The site is bordered by residential houses, which must be treated sensitively to avoid overlooking or overbearing from new development. This development clearly is overbearing to the residential homes. The Botley Road Retail Park TAN stipulates a maximum height of 75.3 metres, which would only allow for 4-storey office or laboratory buildings, including the plant. And clearly this is a whole story higher than that. Officers have said that they think the number of jobs it offers justifies breaking their own rules on height, but I don't think that's a material planning consideration. Surely breaking the height restrictions within the Botley Road Retail Park TAN is a material planning consideration. And then moving on to flooding, I just wanted to check, and perhaps one of you might ask the question whether the overall square metres is equal to or less than the current retail units, because that again is one of the stipulations in the TAN on page 9, that any new development should be less than, because obviously it's in a floodplain. So that it won't lead to a net increase in the built footprint of the existing building, and where possible lead to a decrease, which would be great. In West Oxford, obviously it floods regularly, and residents nearby on the Botley Road and in nearby side roads and the neighbouring, all get sewage in their gardens in times of floods. And so I can't find anything in the documents and the letters from the EA about groundwater.
Councillor Monaghan, I think your time's up.
Okay. Finally, one last point is that most of the maps in the flood risk assessment provided by Elliott Wood are incorrect on pages 13 to 26. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh,
Okay.
Can I make one tiny little thing? I have a couple of requests for conditions. Could we add conditions about grey water use for toilet flushing? 1,000 workers flushing the loo twice a day, that's a lot of water. Could we also have more porous planting areas in the courtyard space? And obviously, could we reduce the height? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, you've overrun your time a bit, so that means that those speaking in favour of the application will extend it so that it's fair to both sides. Okay,
In that
thanks.
case, can I just propose another, if you are minded insanely to allow this, can all the glazing be avian friendly? At the moment,
Okay, yeah. Okay, thanks. Have the those in favour, if you could. Okay, you have 5.5 minutes between the 3 of you. Okay.
Thank you. Just to confirm, my colleague Alex is not actually going to be speaking. It's just Richard and myself, if that's okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is David Bloy. I'm a planning director at British Land. British Land is a leading UK property company. Our purpose is to create and manage outstanding places that deliver positive outcomes for everyone around our sites on a long-term sustainable basis. We are delighted to be sharing our plans with you this evening to create an outstanding lab and innovation space in Oxford. So British Land has submitted 2 planning applications for the redevelopment of 195 Botley Road. However, the sites share a single vision to significantly improve the public realm and support the growth of the science and technology sector in Oxford. We are very grateful to the local community who have been inputting into our plans since last summer, where we hosted a community day on the site and launched a micro park. This was delivered by Raw Workshop, who do amazing work in Oxford, supporting local people into employment. This early and ongoing engagement has ensured that the plans before you today are the best that they can be. Our plans will bring forward significant benefits for the city's economy. This site is an excellent location for these new jobs that were being delivered. It's just a short walk from Oxford's train station and located on the Oxford cycle network and major bus route. And across both sites, the plans will create over 1,800 new jobs. During construction, we'll also create nearly 850 jobs in the local area. British Land also wants to ensure that the new jobs are for local people. And we have a strong track record of supporting communities into employment around our sites across the UK. So I'd like now to hand over to my colleague Richard Warwick from Owers Warwick Architects to talk about how the plans respond to Oxford's high design standards.
Okay, thank you, David. Good evening, members. British Land is committed to the highest standards for sustainability, which is embedded across the whole of the design for 195 Botley Road. The plans target BREEAM Outstanding, which is the highest rating for sustainability in the built environment. Each new building will include rooftop solar panels to maximise on-site energy generation. Our site will be green and welcoming with native planting scheme, wildflower meadows and bug hotels throughout. This will increase the biodiversity by 176% on site A and 103% on site B. Our open courtyard, which sits in the heart of site A, is as large as the Bodleians. It will be filled with natural light and greenery, providing a peaceful retreat off Botley Road. Connectivity to the local area is also embedded in the design, and the plans create new approaches to the site from La Marche Road and Botley Road. Local people will be invited into the site by our new flexible amenity space that faces the road and will become a vibrant social setting during the day and evening. We have reduced car parking by 95%. And the plans also include over 350 cycle spaces across the two sites. And this will ensure that pedestrians are at the heart of the scheme. And this has been a key part of the design process. We've worked closely with the council officers and ensure that the buildings do not encroach on key city viewpoints, but blend into the long views to render the building almost invisible. From close quarters, the building's mass, materials and facades have been developed to create a sympathetic scale and form lasting architectural quality. We believe these plans will be an outstanding development in Oxford and will ensure the city's people and businesses continue to deliver groundbreaking research. I very much hope you can support the plans. Thank you.
Thank you. If you go and sit down, and we may have questions, there may be questions later. So it's over to committee now for questions. Can I start by just asking that the issue that Mr. Rosser raised about our development brief for the site and how we have departed from that here. I just wondered if you could comment on that to start with. On the Botley Retail Park town.
I think there are several issues raised about the technical advice note. It provides guidance about how officers should go about considering new development on that site, and each site is viewed on its own merits. The guidelines have been tested against what is existing situations and how the new building would mitigate against existing situations. So for instance, the relationship of the existing building to number 199, taking into account the existing property that's there and the increased separation and how that would improve that situation in our view. In terms of overall heights, we also need to look at and test the high level views and the verified views, and that also helps us steer and look at heights together with the materiality. And the reason that the heights are in there was really to help us guide development and the impact on the setting of Oxford. So taking that into account, we're satisfied, having looked at the visualisations, that the proposed heights are satisfactory. Again, looking at the distance separation to properties opposite, which is about approximately 40 metres or so, which is a satisfactory distance as well. There's interesting interpretation, it's slightly incorrect, of the interpretation of flooding and no increase in footprint. So the increase in footprint is about any development within the retail park in flood zone 3B. So that's a requirement from the Environment Agency. It's not wide blanket spread across the retail park. So, for example, in these two applications that you're considering today, the development is actually in flood zone 1 itself. It's only a tiny area on the edge that's in flood zone 3. So there's no actually built form. So therefore, there could be an increase in footprint as shown, if you see what I mean. So weighing in a balance, all material considerations provided, considered as part of this application process. We are obliged to look at other, improvements that the development would bring forward, such as the economic growth benefits, the biodiversity benefits, and the enhanced public realm improvements, and taking and contributions towards public transport and other transport improvements, and taking all those material considerations into account. Officers consider that, the height of the proposed development coming forward is acceptable in taking into account what is guidance in the TAN. Sorry, very long answer to that.
Thank you. Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Fowler.
I've actually got two questions. Do you want them both at once? What weight or legal standing does the technical advice note have compared to the local plan? And was the current hard standing / car park built as SUDS compliant, or does it predate it? Or does the new development offer better drainage and therefore potentially reduce flooding?
Shall I do the second one? Just in terms of, yes, it was done a long time ago, and therefore, this development, this development and any new development coming forward in this area would have a much, much better drainage solution. And notwithstanding that, the local plan asks for a betterment. So anything, so all developments now have to provide sustainable drainage and a betterment in terms of runoff. So it would be a vast improvement over what's there now.
Just with regards to the first question, the Botley Road Retail Park Development Brief TAN document sets out on page 6 in paragraph 2.3 that the development brief is not a statutory document, but it is a material consideration in decision making. So it doesn't have the same weight as our local plan. The local plan's the key document. That's the statutory one. That's what we work into. It's a material consideration. The development brief is a material consideration you can take into account, and the officer's report has done so. It doesn't mean that you can't deviate from the development brief. It's not the same, doesn't have the same weight as the local plan.
Other questions? Councillor Henwood and then Councillor Chapman.
I've got a few questions, Chair. Thank you. So my understanding is it will house 1,500 employees, or in excess.
I heard 1,800.
1,800.
Yeah.
Of which there's provision for 2 disabled parking spaces. Is that correct?
I read that there were 2 spaces for operational use, and so I imagine that disabled spaces and 2 disabled. Can you confirm that?
Yeah, there's shared spaces for disabled and other yeah, servicing and delivery, for instance. It would be managed via a delivery and service management plan, and also through the actual occupiers in a sort of booking system, so that if it's needed then for a disabled person, then they'd be able to do that. I hope that answers the question.
Do you want to pursue that?
Just a
David?
little bit, Chair, if I may. I mean, 1,800 seems to be a very high number, with just provision for 2 disabled parking bays. Is there a ratio that we should be looking at within the local plan? Is there some guidance that we should be informed of?
Can I just come back to you on that in a second? The estimated sort of number of jobs is approximately 1,282 jobs, just to clarify that point. So
Do you want me to start with other questions, Chair, while the officer?
we'll just come back.
Yeah, then we'll come back. Yeah.
So my second question is around the type of employment. So my understanding is that within R&D sites, there's provision for category 1 and category 2 employment. I'd like to know what percentage of the employment will be category 1 and category 2. Thank you.
You might want to direct that to the applicant. They
Yes.
might be able to
Yeah.
provide some answers.
I can't claim to be able to answer that question, unfortunately, in terms of the categories of jobs. But we can probably come back to you on that. Apologies.
I mean, do you have a name? Do you have a known occupier of these buildings, or is it still speculative? Because you've obviously been fairly specific about the number of employees, so I assume that there is a particular occupier in mind.
Well, no, we've got full flexibility on who we would let this to. It could be a variety of different occupiers. It could be one occupier. We have calculated the jobs based on floor space, and there's a standard ratio that we've applied to that.
Sorry.
I mean, ultimately, the application's asking for, laboratory and office buildings. It's nothing that says about the percentage or nothing that defines what percentage it needs to be between category 1 and category 2. So.
Come back on the parking standards.
Referring to policy E1.
Just coming back on the disabled parking, there is no standard for disabled parking. It's considered on a case-by-case basis, and the county has raised no objection to the 2 parking spaces proposed for, combined disabled and operational uses.
If at some stage they felt that there was a need for more disabled spaces, is there capacity to do that on the site?
Shall I answer that one? So first of all, there is on site A, it's actually 1,500. The occupation is slightly lower, so it's the combined 2 sites is 1,800. There are 11 car parking spaces on the site B, so in total there's 13 across the site. I think the 2 spaces would be dedicated for disabled, because there is loading bays on both sites that are there for van drop-offs and other sort of operational uses. So that has been designed to accommodate that. So there will be the 2 spaces for site A, and then there are 11 for site B as that comes on as well. So a combination between those 2.
So those 11 spaces would be open to anybody?
They
To the chair, please.
They wouldn't be open to anyone, because they'd be in the control of the landlord, British Land.
Okay.
Yeah, so they could, so they would be designated in that situation.
Chair, just to answer that question from Councillor Henwood, I think Councillor Henwood was misreading the policy. The policy one talks about category 1 and category 2 sites in terms of how our local plan identifies employment sites across the city. So there's certain sites that employment sites that we've got across the city, we've identified as category 1 and category 2 sites. This isn't allocated as either in the local plan. So it's neither a category 1 or category 2 site. The policy is talking about how we will deal with development on those sites.
Councillor Chapman.
Sorry, could we just return to the parking position? I'm still not absolutely clear. When you said you had 11 designated spaces on the other site, sorry, site B, designated for what? Designated for employees or designated for disabled employees?
There are 11 spaces along the side of site B.
Yes.
And that is in the gift of British Land to designate them as they choose, and I'd imagine they would be designated to disabled.
But you're not sure?
Well,
But can you make sure you go through the chair,
Okay,
please?
yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I've heard the answer, so that's,
Well-
should we move on?
Can I just, obviously this site there's 2 applications. I think it's important that we're obviously not on site B. We've presented them to as two separate items because they're 2 separate applications. But again, there are a number of cross dependencies between the 2. So just bear that in mind when the answers are coming about the other site as well, because they are linked. They're under the same ownership. But it was just easier. We could have done one presentation for both schemes, but it's easier to separate them into the 2 and make sure that we're talking about the 2 different issues. So just bear in mind there will be some cross-pollination between the 2 applications.
That's helpful. Other question, go on.
About disabled parking, because I wanted to talk about something else. Could officers explain to me about the sewage provision issue? I'm trying to work out in the end whose job is to do what here to make sure there's enough sewage provision for the expansion of the number of people who are going to be using the site, much more than now. And is it the developer's job as part of the planning application, or is there some role for Thames Water in a bigger infrastructure story? I'm just trying to understand it. It's a clarification question. That's my first area. And secondly, I again like some more assurance around the sunlight issue for the houses that are opposite the development. And the third question is, are we absolutely sure we've done everything we can to protect the privacy of the 199 Botley Road dwelling and the people who live in it, particularly in terms of the glass that's going to be used on the new development here to try and include privacy? So there's 3 areas really: privacy, sewage and sunlight.
Thank you. Do you want to?
Yes, I'll just sort of take it in reverse order. In terms of privacy to 199 Botley Road, there is a condition requiring details that would be approved to ensure that an adequate amount, the details are provided and implemented so that officers can control that it's adequate. And we consider that would be sufficient, along with the mitigating tree planting that they're proposing now along that western edge of the footpath that would also screen any views through to the properties on the other side of that footpath. In terms of sunlight opposite, I wasn't quite sure, sorry, what your question was about, but exactly in terms of sunlight opposite, sorry.
It's in the document, but I'd like you to explain, sorry, it's a complicated area. I'd like you to explain to me and the public so we all understand why you are confident that the limitation of sunlight created by the new development is not so deleterious that it becomes a major issue, all right?
Okay, so the property in question is number 192. In particular, well, it's number 192, which is most affected, because the other properties, through the information submitted, would have adequate daylight and sunlight. So it's not all properties opposite. and it's set out in the report. The BRE guidance says that non-habitable rooms such as landings are not counted, and through site visit, what the window that was identified in the report submitted is in fact a landing window, so we could discount that. So that discounted 182 that was identified. In terms of number 192 opposite, the affected window is to the ground floor bedroom. This is, it would experience a reduction in daylight. Now, what the BRE guidance says is that where there's an obstruction, you look at vertical light and also diffuse light in a room. So where there's an obstruction that would obstruct light from the vertical component into a room, then the BRE guidance advises running the model to assess what it would be like without that obstruction. And as you rightly point out, I didn't mention the fact that this property has the photovoltaics over the top of this window. So when you assess the impact of the proposed development on the property without the PVs that project, it has sufficient light to that room, and therefore it's unreasonable to it basically demonstrates that it's not the development itself that's causing the loss of light to that room, it's actually the property itself. And if that property were to remove those photovoltaics in the future, if they get more efficient, so you have smaller, more in the roof, whatever happens in terms of technology, and that room would have sufficient light, and therefore it's unreasonable to refuse this development on the basis that it's not, it's the neighbour itself that's causing the harm to itself, if you see what I mean, as a result. In terms of sunlight, as I mentioned, it would experience a slight a reduction in sunlight, which would be noticeable, but because it is a bedroom, and the way in which bedrooms are used, they're not your everyday living rooms, it's considered that the percentage loss is acceptable in this case, and not sufficient to warrant refusal. And then in terms of the sitting room, which is the other affected room, the data from the assessment, which I've had verified from the applicant, and it meets the BRE guidance, and they would still have retained 22% of its winter sunlight, annual probable sunlight, winter light, and then 74% annual probable sunlight. So you have winter months and then annual probable sunlight. So it would be unreasonable, you can't refuse, or it's not advisable to refuse a development on the basis that over the whole year, on the basis that, sorry, let me just try and explain this properly. On the basis that you can't refuse something on the basis of a particular date in time, because that would be unreasonable. So therefore you look to make sure that it has adequate annual probable sunlight, in which it does in this case anyway. So whilst it would experience a small change in the sunlight, overall on balance, it would be sufficient light to that property overall. And I think that answers my question.
Not sewage.
Andy's going to answer that.
On the sewage issue, there's two points at play, isn't there? That the issue that we've had and we've discussed at the previous committees about the sewage treatment works with Thames Water, I think we take that as it's linked obviously to foul water and waste, etc. That's a separate issue in terms of specific infrastructure improvements that are going on there. The conditions that we're talking about that Thames Water have also asked us to put on about making sure there's sufficient foul water upgrades to deal with additional flows, they're standard conditions that they seek. So at the moment, there's probably some cross-pollination between the two conditions. It's the responsibility of the developer and also Thames Water to come up with to deal with those and discharge those conditions effectively. The conditions require the developer to put forward or provide us with details of the upgrades that will be undertaken, and they've got to do so in conjunction with Thames Water. So it's a joint thing really in terms of your original question.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Kerr.
Hi, this is obviously a high quality development. And I just want to ask about the drainage, because obviously given the site, drainage is particularly important on the Botley Road. So I guess Felicity, this is probably one for you. Have other options been considered than flag paving? Because obviously flag paving is on a huge area. I know, sorry, via the chair. It just seems like it's very unporous, and I don't know if it's something that we could make a recommendation that this could be reconsidered. There's, you know, huge areas of flag paving. It may be that there is nothing else possible, but I just wondered if that had come up in the planning discussions, alternative, more porous treatments versus all the massive area of flag paving.
In considering the drainage, the sustainable drainage and also the drainage strategy, and together with the landscape in the our officers internally did look at all that across the board, and it wasn't raised as an issue. We could add it as an informative. We couldn't obviously require them to, but we could ask the applicant to reconsider the areas of flag paving as part of the condition compliance, because I think the condition asks for a finalised landscape plan, so we could.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be all of them. Obviously, some of it needs to be hard wearing, but there are just some areas. The cycle parking is, you know, an obvious one where it's not hard footwear. It's just, yeah. But I'll pass that to you. Have you considered alternative, better draining?
Right. Hi. So across the site. At the moment it's purely tarmac. So I think we've got on site A, which we're talking about, it's 2,600 square metres of soft landscaping and just over 3,000 square metres of hard landscaping, which is permeable. We then got the actual buildings themselves. So we've got blue roofs, which attenuates a lot of water. So at the moment, you know, all the water comes onto the ground and comes off the tarmac. So through those, we are absorbing a lot of the runoff and daily rain.
Yeah, just on the point about potentially adding that as an informative, I think it's just important to bear in mind, obviously we're not here, committee's not here to design the scheme effectively, but obviously councillors heard the answer to that question about improvements to sustainable drainage.
Okay. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Yeah, sorry, apologies. I'm going from quite narrow and important to wide and possibly important, I don't know. In the comments made in opposition, there were two, what I thought, but I may have misunderstood, were slightly different positions on what the impact of the flood alleviation scheme has. I just wanted to clarify that. I've not been involved with it for quite some time, so I may be hazy in my memory, but my understanding was that the flood alleviation scheme is to ensure that the current flood plain operates more effectively at being floodplain and is not going to lead to any changes to what the floodplain boundaries actually are. So it'd be good just to clarify that. I appreciate it's less relevant given the point you've made about what is and what isn't floodplain 3 in this, but just be useful to pin that down. The second thing, I may have been, because I was looking up floodplain things and missed the answer to Councillor Henwood's question about the categories of employment. So this may have already been dealt with. I do apologise if I misunderstood. Obviously in the 2004 Act, as you sort of cited, anything that is a material consideration can be taken into account alongside the development plan, which in our case is the NPPF and the local plan. So an answer about the TAN is it is a material consideration, needs to be weighed up. This notion of employment categories, which I was trying to work out what was meant by that, if such a thing exists, and it may be that this is the bit I missed and it doesn't exist, is that a material consideration? And if so, how and what?
the categories in the employment relates to allocated employment sites in the local plan.
It's just the policy E1,
it's
which is
just
sorry.
policy
Okay, so it
E1.
wasn't anything. Okay,
No,
fine. In which case,
and-
ignore that question. Apologies.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't hear the answer.
Yeah,
to the
that's
original bit.
okay. And in relation to the flood alleviation scheme, my understanding is the same as yours, and that the boundary won't change. Whilst it's been approved, clearly we can't take it into account in any event at this point in time until it's actually in place, and the modelling has the EA has done its modelling to assess the impact of it in any case.
Okay, councillor Raymond.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to go back to the Sunlight and 192 Botley Road and the houses across the other side. I know there's a fair distance and it's across the other side of the road, but if the building was lower, would that impact the overall sunlight for the whole year?
Sorry, I did ask them that question, and it wouldn't make a difference.
Oh, are there any more questions? No, in which case, go into discussion. Who wants to kick off with this? Alex.
I will kick off, and I'll kick off because just I didn't feel it was an interest, but I was the cabinet member for planning when the TAN was proposed, so I'm to some extent responsible for that. What I wanted to do was to outline some of the thinking that sat behind it and the consequences that it stemmed from, and therefore its relevance as a material consideration here. So what we're reflecting on, I suppose, is a number of things, but probably the most important goes back to the 2020 changes around use classes, which does mean that it is perfectly possible to take a retail unit on the Botley Road, or indeed anywhere else in the country, and turn it into any kind of employment use in the same building. So no planning permission is required. So that's something just to sort of bear in mind. But I think I would then go further back, and I would go back to when I was a fairly junior councillor and discovered, slightly to my alarm, that the Botley Road was being treated by planning appeals for sites like this one, or in this general area, as essentially a retail park on the edge of town, not actually part of the middle of a city, which it is, near enough, certainly in walking distance from a railway station, which may one day be completed, who knows, but isn't a planning issue we can be taking into account. But in terms of, I guess, I would see it as an error, the building of, sheds with concrete round them or tarmac for car-driven retail, rather than somewhere which it used to be. If you go back 100 years previously, there was plenty of buildings up and down this road which provided jobs for local people who worked in them. Actually what we needed to do was to say, where are the better places in Oxford and beyond for where we want jobs to go? Where are the most appropriate places? And I would compare this to, a business park even on the edge of our city, but certainly beyond it, where the only way of accessing it is in a car, and then compare it to this. And, we've heard the discussion about the parking numbers, and it'll be interesting to see where that part of the conversation goes, whether this is maybe too much of a reduction. I don't think so, but others might. That what this is an opportunity to put jobs in an appropriate place that can be accessed by people from our city, but also beyond, by public transport, whether that's rail or a bus, by bicycle, by walking, in a way that they can't do if those jobs are going to happen somewhere else too far away to reach or with no public transport connection at all. So the principle that lay behind that TAN was addressing an error from 30 years previously, a little bit more, in turning this into a retail park. And there's a chance to reflect and say, actually, it should be what sites like this in this general area, the Waitrose site, for example, which used to have, you know, a lot of jobs on it for a local business back 100 years previously. So my view is the principle is a good one. And I think this is exactly the kind of development that we should be seeing on a site like this, in a supportable location, which is accessible by public transport and not only accessible by cars. I think we can see that the demand, the need is there. There are a lot of new companies either growing internally in our city or looking to come from outside and locate them here. And that is a potentially really positive opportunity for our city and for our people. I think there are some, as there always are with a planning application, pushing the envelope to the edge, because that is the nature of it. And I think this building is certainly at the tallest end of what is appropriate for a site like this. And as I said, I think the ambition on the parking is one I thoroughly approve of, and I'd be interested to hear the views of my colleagues as to whether they think it's deliverable and appropriate. But as a starting point, I would think this is very much the right direction. It's the direction we ought to have been going in a long time before, and it's really good to see things like this finally happening in the centre of our city and beyond, and not just happening out in the countryside where you can only get there by a car. So on that basis, I'm inclined to support. I am just withholding the words I am moving support at this stage because I want to hear what other people say. I wasn't necessarily wanting to go first, but there was such silence, I felt I had to. So on that basis, I'm inclined to go that way, but it will be interesting to hear other views and see where we end up.
Other views, Councillor Elton, then Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, in a similar vein, it's kind of, if we did have an entirely blank site, which we don't, would we put what is currently there on it? I mean, it's currently almost entirely car park. It's got zero drainage, next to no planting. There is 35 retail jobs compared to 1,300, depending on how you draw the boundaries of this one. R&D jobs, 3,500 square meters versus nearly 22,000 square meters. I'm also massively in favour of the reduction of nearly 250 car parking spaces to 2. I think many more sites in Oxford need to be doing that. The existing, single-storey-ish building probably has the thermal performance of a cardboard box generously. This is pushing on the boundaries of BREEAM excellent. It's got an improved frontage to Botley Road, which is currently both a brick wall and a car park. And it does actually provide some measure of community space as well, which actually hasn't been mentioned at all in this, but instead of, a blank wall facing onto Botley Road. So I think, this development sort of moves us forward from, the mistakes made in the 90s, quite frankly. And I think that there should be more developments like this.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, if you just look at it objectively, it's a very large site providing tens of jobs. As you say, as Councillor Elton said, where most of it's a car park. And we're getting a lot more if this goes ahead. Getting more jobs. We're dealing with the need for high quality accessible workspace in the city. There's a massive pent up demand for it, and we've got to find a way of satisfying it if Oxford's going to remain a leader in the fields of science and technology. The community space and the community look of it, is much, much better than what we have at the moment. I mean, there are green spaces there. It just feels like a well thought through development. And I'm also assured by the answers we've had from officers and from the developer that they have thought through some of the issues that people are concerned about. Most the sunlight issue, the issue about overlooking, et cetera. But I agree the height thing is pushing it, but then we are also saying often that we want to see denser building in Oxford. We want to make the most of the space that we have. And this is making the most of the space that we have. And therefore, I don't think there was a strong case to say to the developers, please take down a story or a story in a bit and make it smaller. And so for all those reasons, economic, social, community impact, and the care that's gone in to the application in terms of dealing with some of the issues that would affect local residents, I will be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Raymond.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think, excuse me, my colleagues have said most of the things that I would support also. However, as the objector said earlier, it would be ideal for housing, but I don't think we have that option because it can be built on anyway. But I do think the parking is great, that we don't need parking there, or the applicant thinks they don't need parking there, so that's absolutely wonderful. But I do think actually the height issue is just, I know the colleagues have said it's just enough. For me, it's just too much. That's where I differ. I think the impact that it has for the residents that are already there, the height is too much. So for that reason, I'm not going to support it. Everything else is well thought out. I think it's brilliant. But if it was a story less, it'd be probably perfect and not so many people would object. Thank you.
Councillor Henwood.
Yes, I like the design. I like the amount of work that's gone into it and the fact that there could be 850 local jobs being produced by this development. The drawback that obviously I am having is being inclusive, Chair. We do have disabled workforce, and I think just 2 parking spaces to accommodate that particular user group is disturbing. I would like to see more parking or more access for disabled users, not necessarily in the form of parking spaces, but other forms of more innovative ways of bringing those disabled people into the realm of their workspace. Thank you.
Is there any more? No. Sorry.
Yes, I find myself a bit conflicted about this application. I think it is a good building, good design. I'm pleased that the retail sheds and the extensive hard standing car parking is going. I have, like Councillor Raymond, concerns about the impact on local residents. Looking at the disabled parking issue, I was amazed to discover by doing a very quick Google search that there is no legislation about the ratio of disabled parking to employees. However, it is possible to put it in your local plan. I did find some local plans which have it in, so perhaps that's something could be looked at for the next revision of the local plan. On balance, and somewhat reluctantly, I think I will be supporting this application.
Thank you. Any other comments? I think we're moving towards a consensus with some reservations. It's obviously a very bold but nevertheless well thought out plan, challenging in terms of height and relative absence of parking. On this disabled parking, my only concern would be if and we don't know who the employer will be, if you found that you had quite a lot of people who needed disabled parking, my concern would be, would there be capacity to review that to ensure that those people, if they needed to, would be able to have parking on site so that they would be able to access those jobs? Is that
It was a nod. I wasn't sure if it was a question, but yes, 100% yes.
So we have a proposal on the table to support this with. I think.
Can I propose?
You were.
Can I propose we proceed to a vote on?
Yes. Do we have a second? And we have a seconder.
Can I just add?
Yeah.
Officers sent round just 2 conditions about from Thames Water to add into the decision. Just can I confirm you're happy to the officer's recommendation subject to the addition of 2 conditions about foul water? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm seeing nods, so I think we're happy to accept those. So The proposal is to accept the officer's recommendation, subject to all the attached conditions and the additional two. Can I see those in favour, please? And those against? Okay, so that is carried. Thank you. And we now move on to the second application, item 6, which is for units 2 to 5 in Botley Retail Park. And I think this is you again, Felicity. Yeah, do you want to have a look? Oh, sure. Okay, thank you. Back to item 6.
Thank you, Chair. Right, item 6. So this is the application by the same applicant for similar flexible research and development office space on the site to the south of the one that you've just been considering within the Botley Retail Park. So I quickly whiz again through. So just the view down the Botley Road towards the back of the site there and the Hinksey Meadows behind. This is the view. As I said before, this is where the realigned access from Laymarsh Road would go at this point, and the development would sit on your left-hand side where the existing buildings are. Just looking back the way, so you've got Dewson's beside it, which is not part of the application site, the next door neighbour, and the shared parking. You should note that the 10 car parking spaces in front of Dewson's within this site would remain. So there would be 10 at that point in front of Dewson's. And then, as mentioned before, there'd be a re-provision of 11 spaces on the application site itself. So just looking at the back, there's rear access to Dewson's sort of builder's yard, which sits directly behind the application site. And the access that you can just see in this photograph would therefore remain and be used for servicing and delivery of the proposed development. Just looking back towards the Hinksey Meadows and the builder's yard, and then back up Laymarsh Road. And then again, back at the site we have just been considering. So the existing site plan and the proposed site plan. So, sorry, beg your pardon. CGI views of what the building would look like. It doesn't include in this visualization the proposed development that you have just voted to approve in front of it, just to note that. And looking from the corner of the property in the left-hand slide, so your Hinksey Meadows is on the left-hand side of that, sort of at the back on your left-hand side of that view, and on the right-hand image, that would be looking back the way besides Jewson's, basically the front onto the car parking area. And you can see that the trees, new tree planting along that new access road within that image. So existing portal frame building again, images, and then the proposed development, which again is 4 stories with plant on the roof. Just taking you through the floor plan for this. It is just research and development and office space. It has no other sort of commercial space, unlike the front site. Roof plan, and then again with views, and these are the same as you've just seen before, and again just popping up with the cumulative impact from these high level views, as you have seen already. So as you'll see from the report, it's very similar in its nature and design to that you've already considered and approved. On this site, again, the principle is acceptable for the reasons we've already debated, and the additional approximate numbers of additional jobs net increase would be 494 net increase in jobs, and 522 in total, which would obviously provide for and enhance Oxford's current provision and its quest for global fame on the life and mind provision. So the development would positively enhance, in officers' view, the character and appearance of this part of the Botley Retail Park. It has been designed and considered in relation to the application you have just approved. Again, as discussed earlier, it would be visible on high level views, but again, and cause a moderate level of less than substantial harm to the setting of Oxford and its central conservation area. But as set out in the committee report, the level of public benefits derived from the development would outweigh the harm in this case. Again, the development is in flood zone 1. There is a small area to the west, the eastern edge of the site that's in flood zone 2 and 3. The development is therefore acceptable in this location, and due to the drainage strategy and sustainable drainage systems proposed, it would not contribute towards flooding of the area, and adequate mitigation of drainage would be provided. As discussed, 11 of the car parking spaces from within the shared car parking would be re-provided along the western edge of the development for disabled and operational uses. Yeah, officers consider that this is acceptable when taking into account the land owned by the applicant in the blue land and the significant reduction in car parking site-wide. There would be sufficient cycle parking provided. There'd be no adverse impact in terms of traffic generation, and subject to conditions and contributions again toward the Botley Road highway improvements, bus services improvements, and improvements at the railway station, and together with travel plans. In terms of amenity, there is no harm to any residential amenity as a result of this development. And as I have mentioned before, it's a high quality landscape scheme, which offers a significant benefit in terms of net gain, on-site net gain for this site. On balance, therefore, subject to conditions and an additional condition I should add, which relates to the car parking, that in order to make sure there's no net increase in car parking overall, if this site came forward before the other site, then we are suggesting a condition that says there should be no net increase in so they should not bring the 11 car parking spaces into use until the car parking in the shared car parking area has been reduced in number by a minimum of 11, so that there would be no net increase, so that it accords with policy M3 on car parking in this regard. And this is possible because the applicant owns both sites. And so in conclusion, together with the additional condition, officers recommend approval for the proposed development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Again, we have one speaker against. Councillor Muddiman, do you want to come forward? And you have up to 5 minutes.
I won't use my 5 minutes. All my objections are the same, so I won't repeat them. So I'll just save you all time.
Thank you. And we have David Bloy and Richard Warwick again. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank you for your endorsement of the first part of our plans for 195 Botley Road this evening. I wanted just to take a small amount of your time just to reiterate how the two applications will create significant benefits for Oxford's economy. As covered in my earlier speech, the plans will create outstanding workspace for Oxford and west of Oxford. This will help to meet local need and position the city as a hub for research excellence. Our two applications are closely linked and have been prepared with equal attention and care. This second application will create more than 500 jobs and will be built to the highest standards for sustainability, including a 103% increase in biodiversity. I'm very grateful for your time this evening. I very much hope that you can support this application to bring forward the shared benefits for 195 Botley Road. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? No? Do people, do we go into debate? Yeah, okay. Am I thinking that people feel that the same issues apply here and that we're happy to take a vote on this application as it is? Okay. Does anyone want to propose? Okay, Lawrence?
Yes, I propose that we accept the officer's recommendation.
Okay. That's with the attached conditions.
Are there any conditions to be attached from Thames Water?
Not in this case. The conditions that Thames Water require are actually on the application, so there's nothing additional, no.
Except for the condition that Felicity alluded to about car parking.
And you're happy to accept that, okay? Do we have a seconder for that? Ajaz, Councillor Raymond? Okay, so we have a proposal on the table to accept the officer's recommendation with the attached conditions and the additional one about car parking. Can I see all those in favour of this application? And any against? And any abstentions? Okay, fine. So that is carried. Thank you very much. Sorry, Councillor Henwood?
Yes, on the advice of the monitoring officer, I have spoken against an application that's coming up this evening in the way it is funded. So I'm going to withdraw myself from plot 27, the Oxford Road, the Oxford Science Park.
Okay. And we'll just make, if you don't go too far away, we'll make sure that you get called back in when we've decided this application.
Okay. Is it my turn? Sorry, I'm dialing in, so I can't tell what's going on in the room.
Jen, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, we're just, people are just leaving and then we'll tell you when to go on, okay?
Okay, thanks.
Right, we're moving on now to agenda item 7, and we have Jennifer Coppock presenting this virtually. So I'll hand over to her. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just before I begin my presentation, I have a small verbal update to make. There's a clause that will be included in the section 106 regarding the removal of 23 parking bays once the Eastern Arc bus route is operational, as well as the Cowley branch line being operational. But actually, we're going to remove the trigger for the Eastern Arc bus route, so it will just be removal of 23 parking spaces once the Cowley branch line is operational, which is consistent with other similar applications and plots 23 to 26 on the Science Park.
Thank you. Do you want to continue with continue the presentation?
Yeah. So this is a full planning application which relates to the last remaining undeveloped plot within the Oxford Science Park, a Category 1 employment site, which is included in the Science Park's local plan allocation for business development. We've got some site photos here. So this photo is taken on the walkway of Grenoble Road. Here is the approximate location of the vehicular access into plot 27. And this is the Grenoble Road roundabout, which you'll be familiar with. And this is the Thames Water Pumping Station, which you can see is under construction at the moment. In the distance, we've got the Ozone Leisure Complex, and here is plot 27. This is plot 27 with plot 16 in the background. So phase 1, which is this building, is actually occupied at the moment. Phase 2 will commence shortly. And this photograph shows the relationship between the site and the Grade 2 star listed Priory Minchery Farmhouse. And you can see the Cassam Stadium there in the distance. This is from the Minchery Lane public right-of-way, plot 27 and plot 26 on the left and the Ozone Complex on the right. So the application seeks permission for a 5-storey office and laboratory building within use class E with a gross internal area of 9,306 square metres, alongside associated landscaping, 168 car parking spaces and 104 cycle parking spaces. Amendments have been made to the originally submitted scheme, which include repositioning the building 8 metres to the south and 9 metres to the west of its original position, in order to limit the impact on archaeologically significant features associated with the Grade 2 star listed priory. As a result of these amendments, the level of harm caused to these remains has been lowered to a moderate level of less than substantial, which officers consider has been outweighed by the public benefits as set out within the committee report. With regards to the harm caused to the setting of the priory above ground level, the proposal would cause a low level of less than substantial harm, taking into account the development already located on the Ozone Leisure Centre. This harm has been outweighed by public benefits coming forward as part of the proposal. As set out within the committee report, following protracted engagement with the EA, it's now satisfied that the proposal would not impact on the existing volume of flood storage and supports the application, subject to compliance with the FRA and drainage strategy, which would be secured by condition. The applicant team also worked hard to avoid the Minchree Farm Oxford City Wildlife Site, which is hatched in pink on the plan, as far as possible. The building footprint would not fall within the wildlife site, and the only development sitting within the site would be a section of vehicular access road and a small triangular section of parking. Given the proposed ecological enhancements on site, the design of the box culvert to provide suitable wildlife habitats, as well as the 5.96% biodiversity net gain, the proposal is considered acceptable in ecological terms, as set out within paragraphs 10.73 to 10.78 within the committee report. Separation distances between the Priory, Minchree Lane and the New Thames Water Pumping Station, or the buildings within the Science Park and the wildlife site, have been maximised as shown on this slide. This is the ground floor plan, which shows the proportion of parking that would be undercroft beneath the building. The ground floor of the building would accommodate a publicly accessible exhibition space, hot desking areas and internal cycle stores with adjoining end-of-journey facilities. This is a typical floor plan, as the proposal is speculative with no end user secured. The upper floor plans have not been detailed, but will comprise labs and associated offices with a consistent core of stairs, lift shaft and staircases. This is another indicative floor plan which shows laboratories, write-up spaces and breakout spaces. An extensive biodiverse roof would be installed alongside PV panels and mechanical plant behind a 4.4 high metre screen. The building is large in terms of its height at almost 21 metres to the top of the plant screen and with a depth of 60 metres. However, the scale is comparable to existing buildings on the Oxford Science Park to the east, which fall under a similar use. As a comparison, the proposed building is smaller in height and footprint than plot 16 to the north of the site, which I showed previously in the site photos, and I mentioned that phase 1 is now occupied. Further, there are several sizable buildings to the east of the site, including the buildings on the Ozone Leisure Park and the Hampton Hotel. Finally, given the site's allocation within the Oxford local plan, it would be expected that a building of the proposed scale would be located on this site. The submitted materials palette comprises natural muted tones such as bronze, brown and beige, which is intended to complement the existing palette throughout the Science Park, whilst also responding appropriately to the stone priory. Material details would be secured by condition to ensure that the proposal is of high quality and would not impact negatively on the historic setting. Within the context of the surrounding development, it's considered that the scale of the building would be appropriate, as shown within this LVIA rendered image. This is an aerial CGI view, which shows raised planters to be installed adjacent to the Minchree Lane public right-of-way and the Priory, with public access enabled directly off the footpath, enhancing the setting of the listed building. New trees and a build-up of shrubs are proposed along the site's boundaries, and an enhancement of the historic pond would all form part of the landscape strategy. This is a view, and you can see here the Priory and the proposed landscaping and the openness of the site. This is taken from the Minchree Lane public right-of-way. This is the proposed building here. And that's it. So in conclusion, officers consider that the proposed development would respond appropriately to the site context and adhere to the local plan site allocation and the local plan policies as a whole. It's therefore recommended that Planning Committee approve the application subject to the Section 106 legal agreement and finalisation of conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We don't have anybody to speak against, but we have Mr. Jitesh Patel from the Oxford Science Park to speak in favour. Once again, Mr. Patel, you've got 5 minutes in which to speak. Could you push the button so that the red light comes on?
Sorry about that. I'm Jitesh Patel, Head of Development at the Oxford Science Park, and I'm very pleased to speak with you tonight in support of our application for plot 27. This application seeks planning permission to deliver up to 9,000 square metres of new laboratory and office space at the Oxford Science Park, with the ability to create approximately 440 additional jobs from potential occupiers that will utilise the space. This permission is much needed to meet the substantial demand for new laboratory and office space at the park, which forms one of the key locations of choice for science and technology companies in Oxfordshire. Many of our existing companies, some of which started life on the park as small startups, are now growing and needing larger space and better facilities to develop their ideas. Occupancy levels on the park are nearing 100%, and plot 27 would serve to provide this much needed space and to ensure we retain these companies on the park. More importantly, our wider objective is to attract high quality life science companies to Oxfordshire and to keep these companies in Oxfordshire rather than to see them move away or even out of the UK. The Oxford Science Parks is majority owned by Magdalen College, Oxford, and hosts close to 100 businesses currently, which range from small startup companies based in the Magdalen Centre to some of the bigger major international companies. Companies based at the park include Exscientia, Oxford Nanopore Technologies, more recently the Ellison Institute of Technology, and Novo Nordisk. We have Citrix, and we also have Theolytics. The development and planning process for plot 27 has now been running for over 2 years. During this period, we have listened and diligently and respectfully managed the specific requirements from multiple stakeholders and consultees to develop a scheme that carefully considers the special archaeological, historical and ecological characteristics of the site. In addition, we have listened to the City Council, the Oxfordshire County Council, Historic England and the Environment Agency to develop plot 27 to preserve the site heritage and create a facility that complements the local context. Due to the period of time since our first application back in 2022, we've actually been able to upgrade the design. So we are now focused more around achieving the baseline or the key targets that come out of 2021 building regulations. So we improved the performance of the building to Part L. BNG is at 5.86%. And we've generally improved the thermal performance of the building and increased the volume of PV panels on the roofs. The development of plot 27 will build on previous consents granted by this planning committee at the park. We recently completed construction of the Iverson building at plot 16. We have most recently secured leases with the Ellison Institute of Technology and also with Novo Nordisk, who will start occupying the building within the next coming months. We're also in the process of constructing the Daubney project at plots 23 and 26, which is one of the largest developments we've undertaken on the park so far and demonstrating the park's strong commitment to delivering new laboratory and office space. The park will also host the new Oxford campus for the Ellison Institute of Technology, which is currently being constructed on plot 18 within the park. The development will deliver significant public benefits, which will boost the local economy through delivery of new jobs during construction and the operational phases. A new public open space complemented by high quality landscaping and heritage information boards promoting the historical past of the site. And in addition, the proposed development will secure significant financial contributions via the section 106 towards the Eastern Arc bus route, active travel improvements to the local area, and the delivery of the Cali branch line, to which I have to say we've already made significant financial contributions. And also, we're also very much in support of the community employment and procurement plans, which will flow through the section 106 agreement, which we see as promoting and securing social value and support to the local and wider communities across Oxfordshire. So for these reasons, I respectfully ask members of this committee to accept the recommendation to grant the permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, do we have any questions now for officers? Oh, right. Councillor Fairweather and Councillor Hollingsworth.
On the site location plan, I presume the sort of dark line at the top, the curved dark line is actually the railway line. Do we yet know where the station might be along that line on the plan?
Yeah, I can answer that. Jen might be able to highlight the site plan for us. At the moment, there's the plot 16, which is being developed. Jen can point to it on the cursor. Can you see? Yeah. Come across, yeah. So where the dog leg of the blue line goes, there's like a little L shape close to Priory Lane. That's the location there where the station or the potential halt is going to go.
Okay, thank you.
Alex.
Mine's about history and archaeology, so a bit like trains. Yeah, sorry. The question I had, obviously, as the report makes clear, and the words from the applicant, this is one of the most important historical sites in this part of the city, and there's a whole load of history here which has not been apparent for quite some time. So the two questions I had were, one, obviously the priory itself is outside this, but what potential connections in terms of some of the benefits that are lifted from the work on this site, connecting it to the One Hopes one day revived and reopened site of the actual surviving buildings, as opposed to the remains of the buildings and the pond on this site next door. And the second thing is, given things like the remains of the buildings will, you know, usually with the archaeology will be explored and then covered up, but we have got a pond here which and that we don't get many of these in this country, surviving ponds which are this old. And obviously it's long since lost its utility by hundreds of years. So the question is, what possible, I suppose, outcomes from the work on the site, and then the, not the restoration of it, but the recording of it and the public access to it can be kept visible in some way. So I think you talked about exhibitions or whatever it might be, something like that, because the potential here is, if and when the site outside this, the building outside this site ever gets revived, then there's potential for a really interesting, important historical site, which will say something about Littlemore's history, which I think is often overlooked.
Thanks.
So that's partly an officer question, and if the applicant wishes to pick it up, if anything that is unsaid, or just say, note what I said before, that would be absolutely fine.
Jen, do you want to come in initially, and then I'll ask the applicant to respond?
Yes, so there will be information boards within the landscaped area, and there is a condition that the information that's put on those boards is approved by our archaeologists, so that we've got all the appropriate information out there to enhance learning. There's also a small exhibition space within the ground floor reception area. And then in terms of sort of the foundations and the remains that will remain underground of the priory, there's a nice landscaping feature which isn't actually shown on, oh no, it is. It's shown in very faint red lines there in the car parking area. Can you see? That shows the outline of the remains underground and tells that story, which is actually quite effective. It's been done on a site in the city centre, and it has worked very well. I want to say it's Lucy Faithful House in the city centre. So there is that publicly accessible information there.
Would you like to come back, Mr. Patel?
Yes, if I may.
Luigi Simeone, I'm the lead designer from Bogle Architects. The entire site plan is designed to respect the archaeology and the heritage. The portion of the site to the north, so to the top of the page, the right top of the page, is being shaped to represent the courtyard of the priory. So that space has been given up from the site to the public to become a front square to the priory building, if you like. That's part of our contribution. The pond, as you say, it's very interesting feature element. We've, since the beginning of the scheme, since the original application, we have been looking to revitalize that, bringing it back as a live element of the landscape, and it's now been integrated within the drainage and flood attenuation measures. So it becomes an actually active water body that with water level rising, depending on the season, creating not only an element of historical remembrance, but also an active element both for the SAT system and the biodiversity net gain, creating an element of rebeds and wetlands around it. As the officer also mentioned, the idea of remarking on the ground the presence of any remains that would be found through the excavation that we already carried out and the one that will be carried out before the construction of the foundations will be recorded and presented to the public through space which is fully accessible. We also have raising the level of the ground of the building about 700 millimeters. That allows us to have about 1.2, 1.3 meter of clear space in between the level we are occupying and any remains we have found so far. That allow us to build most of the ground floor and most of the structure without having to touch any of the remains, which will stay there completely intact.
Thank you. Yeah.
And just to sort of add, just to build on the two comments you've had there, having been part of the discussions over the period of time on this application, there really has been a lot of work gone on with the design team to deal with the constraints of the archaeology, but also to try to reflect that heritage, certainly with regards to the nearby priory and other constraints they've got, which is why we've highlighted that in the report, because the applicant has gone a real long way to try to preserve that significance as much as they possibly can. So, the design choices they've made over time have really gone, take this seriously, the issue of that importance that's underneath the ground.
Thank you. Excellent. Anna, you had a question?
Yes, so first off, I'm also very taken by the historic pond. I think we need more historic ponds. So it's a slightly flippant question, but to start with, which is why is it not as tall as site 16? And the sort of more substantive question is around sort of, so I understand, the actual proper vehicle access is from, is it Robinson Avenue, which is really hard to say. However, the other access, at the moment, the sort of Priory Road bit, some of it is inside the red line, some of it is not. At the moment, it's kind of becoming an increasing sort of free for all in terms of access. I mean, like an access gate has disappeared. I think there's like one set of really dodgy bollards at one end, but basically I couldn't see anything on the plans about this, but basically how are we preventing essentially vehicle access from Grenoble Road, from that slightly odd bit that is currently there, if that makes sense? Because otherwise, you could have, I guess, that's my sort of vague question.
So in terms of the height, we had to be mindful of the proximity to the Grade 2 star listed priory and the impact that the building will have on the setting of that building. Of course, we already have the context within the Ozone Leisure Centre and other buildings within the Science Park, but this site is more sensitive, hence the lower height, whilst also trying to make the most efficient use of the site. In terms of access from Grenoble Road, I don't know if I've misunderstood your question, but were you talking about the access from Minchery Lane instead, and how are we going to prevent?
Well, it is from both ends. So yeah, there's the bit underneath the railway line where, you know, the access gate has literally disappeared, and also from the south from Grenoble Road as well, where there is that sort of current access, but then there isn't really anything stopping you just essentially now driving the entire length, I think. So is there anything in these plans around, preventing that access?
There aren't actually, as far as I know, any plans to prevent in terms of, bollards and gates. We've tried to keep the site as open as possible and as permeable as possible, which is sort of what we always try and do in urban design terms. Whether the science park are going to manage vehicular access in another way, I'm not sure. It's probably best for the applicant to answer.
Sorry, Chair, could you just ask a clarification on the question? Are you suggesting that there's nothing preventing vehicles driving all the way down Priory Lane and through into Littlewell now? Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm not sure it is. So certainly, so if you look right at the top, so I'm looking at Google Maps now, you've got this like row of the Priory Road crosses, right? There used to be a white gate that was locked there. That's gone. And I think at the bottom, I'm not even sure there are bars at the bottom end anymore. So I actually think we might actually be able to. So yeah.
I mean, that condition exists already. It's not altered by this development in any way, shape, or form. So, I mean, ultimately, some of that is outside the red line anyway.
I guess I was kind of interested because some of it is inside it. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I understand the question. What I'm saying is, we can investigate whether it's reasonable to put a bollard at one end so that you can't, drive down. But again, I think the condition already exists that in terms of where that white gate may well be. And I know what you're talking about. Again, that's outside the red line of the site. We can take that away and maybe have a look at that separately outside the conditionless application. But I do understand the point you're making.
Okay. Any other questions? No. Okay. Comments?
Well, I mean, you gathered my not solo, it turns out, interest in historic ponds. But I think this is actually, I mean, we're trying to do two things, or as the planning authority here, we're obviously trying to make a decision, but here we have two interesting things which are coming together. One is the science park, the expansion of the science park, and also we hope in our own lifetimes, it feels like it's been dragging for ages, but it may happen fairly soon, connection via a rail public transport system. Railway's still there, just need the trains and the platforms. So this seems like a good place for development of this sort, but as the applicant said, this is an extremely sensitive site, and so this has been a lot of work to get to this stage. From the original, I guess, draw a rectangle on and go, is that okay? And then it transpires very quickly that it is not okay because of the history here. And I think what is proposed is actually a really good, eloquent, thoughtful application to meet those two needs, somewhere with jobs to reflect our growth next to our transport system, which we hope will enable people who work there to get there on a train, which obviously they currently can't, and also to respond respectfully to the history, and that is really important history. And what's outlined is an opportunity, if and when the other site ever gets revived, to really draw attention to something I think is really important. So on those principles, I think there is a minor degree of harm, as officers have outlined, that is outweighed by positives, and I would therefore like to recommend acceptance of the planning application, plus any conditions which I can't recollect being mentioned, but that might be my memory. No, there weren't. In which case, just as it stands.
I'm happy to second that. Does someone? No. Okay. So we have a proposal on the table to accept this application with the conditions as set out, but with no additional ones. Can I see all those in favour, please? I think that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much. And can somebody fetch councillor Henwood, please? Much. Okay. Okay, moving on to item 8, plot B2 Old Road Campus. And Sarah Orchard's presenting.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a reserved matters application following the approval of an outline application for 5 new plots for research, development and teaching at Old Road Campus, which was approved in July 2013. So this presentation relates to the reserved matters for the final whole plot on Old Road Campus, which is plot B2, and proposes a 3-storey laboratory building with basement and plant, a 3-storey laboratory building with basement and plant at roof level with associated substation building, cycle storage building and landscaping. The original application was subject to an environmental impact assessment. This development is also considered a departure from policy RE1 of the Oxford Local Plan, as it seeks to achieve passive house rather than a 40% reduction in carbon emissions from building regulations Part L. So this is the application site. It sits at the northern end of the central spine road that runs through the campus. It sits just to the south of Old Road here. So there's residential development to the north of the site, to the west of Old Road Campus here in Mileway Gardens, and also to the east of Churchill Drive. The site is currently occupied by a temporary building, the New Richards building, a nursery car park, and the Triangle Day Nursery sits just to the west of the site. So these are some photos of the existing application site. So you can see here the temporary New Richards building, which would be lost as a result of the development. And just here you've got the amenities and facilities building, which is an earlier plot that came forward as part of the master plan. On this lower photo, you're looking across the informal car park, which serves the nursery, towards Boundary Brook House, which is a red brick building here on the edge of the campus. Finally, this is a photo looking up the central road through the campus. You can see a temporary construction compound here, which would become the landscaping at the front of the building, with the New Richards building just behind, and the Triangle Day Nursery sits just here among the trees. So this is the existing site plan. You can see again, closer up, the New Richards building, the nursery car park, and the Triangle Day Nursery. And this is the proposed development shown on the site plan. It's proposed to formalise the nursery car park. Should be noted that that is currently under temporary permission. So we've recommended a condition that that should be temporary to be resolved as part of any forthcoming application if the day nursery is to be retained. The main building here, the proposed landscape square to the front of the building, the substation to the rear of the building, and some proposed additional cycle storage here adjacent to the existing cycle store that came forward as part of plot B3A. So these are the proposed floor plans. We've got the basement with some lecture space, got office space, laboratory space, a cafe here on the ground floor at the front of the building, and then further office and laboratory space on the upper floors. Finally, with the roof plan. So these are some existing sectional elevations through the site, showing the lower scale building that's currently there with the larger buildings that have already come forward. The day nursery here. And some further existing site elevations. And these are the proposed elevations for the building, showing here the basement, the ground first and second floors with the plant on the roof. And the day nursery is currently shown here, which is under a temporary permission. This is the front south elevation of the building. There'll be a terrace above the cafe here on the ground floor at the entrance. And these are the proposed east and west elevations. This is some proposed elevations showing the outline planning permission scale parameters. So as mentioned in the officer's report, there is a breach of those outline scale parameters, which are dotted through here. So the lower floors, excluding the plant, fit within the scale that was allowed, and then the plant on the roof slightly exceeds those levels. The outline condition did say that those parameters should be adhered to unless otherwise agreed in writing. It's considered that the reserve matters is a suitable place to agree any alterations to those previous scale parameters, as was the case also with plot B3A. These are some proposed visuals of the site. So the first one showing the south elevation of the building with the proposed landscaping, which is designed to sit at the heart of the campus. The cafe fronting onto this space with the terrace above. And the lower picture is a proposed visual from the west, also looking over that proposed green space. And these are some proposed visuals showing the relationship with Old Road. So the first one is showing the trees and how the building would sit in amongst the trees. Some additional tree planting is proposed in that area. And then for clarity, a visual below with the trees removed. And then the smaller image is more of an aerial view showing the impact of the proposed plant. So some of the breaches of the original outline is the flues here that have been encased. In elevation, it's difficult because to see it, but in 3D, it's much easier to appreciate the scale of those and how they would sit away from each other. So there's some verbal updates to make today. The first one is that there's been a further objection from Headington Heritage following the publication of the committee report. This relates to comments in the report on whether the site does fall within the catchment areas of the Lye Valley SSSI for groundwater and surface water. It should be clarified that they don't, they sit just outside of the catchment zone. In relation to groundwater, this is just outside of the buffer zone. In relation to surface water, this is just outside the catchment zone for the Southern Fen. There was also some objections as well in relation to the basement, which had already been made. The basement, as previously said in the officer report, is something that was agreed at outline stage. This went through consultation with Natural England at the time of the outline application, and again has been through consultation as part of this application. No objection has been raised, and they're also being consulted on a conditions application. The drainage there was an outline drainage strategy under the outline application for the whole site, which has previously been approved. And then as each plot comes forward, each plot requires a site-specific drainage strategy as well, which they're being consulted on, which is currently got no objection from Natural England. And so the officer's recommendation, in accordance with the conditions which may be subject to amendments to ensure consistency with the outline conditions which also need to be discharged under a separate application, the recommendation is that whilst the application doesn't comply with policy RE1 of the Oxford local plan in relation to energy efficiency, it's considered that the proposal would actually result in a more highly energy efficient building, which could be achieved under the policy requirement. And the proposal, despite exceeding the scale parameters in relation to the height set out at outline stage, is not considered to be a significant material change that would result in harm to the assessments made under the original planning application. In all other respects, the development is considered acceptable, and the officer recommendation is therefore to approve the planning application subject to conditions.
Thank you, Sarah. We have 3 speakers in favour of the application. Would you like to come forward, please? Right. So you have 5 minutes, and if you press the button so the red light comes on.
Good, good to be here. I'm Adrian Hill. I am the director of the Jenner Institute, part of the Department of Medicine at the University of Oxford. And I've been working on vaccines now for over 20 years. I was partly involved with the development of the Oxford COVID vaccine with AstraZeneca and the Serum Institute of India. And my main interest is on malaria vaccines, where we've now also licensed a vaccine in the last year or two. The strategic need for this development is that we learned from the pandemic, and it was a new experience for nearly all of us, that alignment of people with different skill sets, ideally on the same site, was absolutely crucial. We were close to that, but not really there. We certainly weren't in the same building. We had people from 5 different buildings, either designing the vaccine, making the viral vector, doing the immunology, looking at best way of manufacturing the vaccine, then later doing clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, all of which took place in Oxford on the Old Road campus. We learned a lot about how we could do better, and one obvious thing was to bring those people together. And very luckily, this was the last remaining site on the Old Road campus, and we adjusted the purpose of that so that this building that we're talking about today is partly a vaccine building and partly what we call a Pandemic Sciences Institute. So, of course, you respond to a pandemic not just with vaccines, but with drugs, if you can find one. We did in the Discovery trial in 2021, with diagnostics, with all sorts of different assays that need to be done. And that multidisciplinary effort involving social scientists and policymakers in consultation with the developers is really crucial to make this go quickly. And you never need to go faster than in a pandemic response. We made a vaccine in a year. It typically takes about 10 years. So this is an exciting development for many of us. It is one we've discussed with many partners around the world, funders, public health authorities, the WHO, and so on. And it's widely considered there's a need for a focus that we've learned the hard way about during the COVID pandemic. But remember, of course, we were also dealing with other outbreak pathogens in earlier years, notably Ebola in West Africa, and there are a list of 10 others that I won't bore you with. So we are excited that this building has now come to a revised plan, but one which we think is a much improved plan on an ideal site not only embracing the people in those different disciplines, but in a major research university, having access to other expertise around the university in the centre of town, as well as on the John Radcliffe site. So I hope you find it approvable.
Thank you. I think that.
So you're available just to answer questions?
Exactly,
Right,
yeah.
lovely, thank you. Okay, questions, to start with. Alex?
It's for officers, sorry. The question I wanted to ask is about, well, it's a material consideration to go back to our previous discussion, paragraph 1039 of the report, and what officer reported on the apparent breach in policy RE1, but which is not a bad thing. In fact, it's an extremely good thing. The paragraph, which is at some length and sets out a really important potential principle for considering, and I think it says this is the first attempt at this in the world. So, you know, it's always good, whether it's you know, things to avoid viruses, or things to make buildings more environmentally friendly. It's quite exciting. So the question I had was, well, one, can you just set out that little bit of principle that is being established here, and indeed whether that then becomes a material consideration which can be considered if other applicants are as imaginative as this applicant in trying to address this, because this is a new and different way of trying to achieve something which our policy has been quite rigid about. And from that point of view, it seems like a really positive and progressive thing.
Yeah, so in the relation to this, the principle of what they're trying to achieve is passive house. So it's all designed around a fabric first approach, which is designed to make energy requirements and demand a lot lower. So this has been carefully looked at with other officers internally in the department, for a lab, especially with such high energy demands. This is a really good ambition to try and achieve. So doing that is supported by us. And in how we've looked at it is a plot kind of case by case basis of them looking to achieve this is very site specific to this type of building, a research and development building. And if other people came forward with it in the future, we'd have to look at that in relation to that specific case to see whether that is something that is possible and could be supported. Sorry, just in relation to the principle, was that?
Yeah, that's. Sorry, that was exciting flashing light. It was explaining the principle. I just wanted to make sure I'd fully understood that what is on paper a breach of policy RE1, in fact, using material consideration actually goes beyond what an attempt to achieve RE1 would have achieved, assuming it works, which one assumes it will. And then does that then, as you say, establish at least a starting point as a material consideration for any future application? So I think you've answered it, positive in both ways.
Yeah, just to clarify, the reason it can't comply with RE1 is due to, I think we said in the report, that due to modelling, and passive houses modelled in a very separate way to RE1, so they could look at complying with RE1, but they're never actually making their building worse in order to comply with it. So overall, we think, yeah, it's a strong justification for departure from policy in this case.
Good, thank you. Anna? So I have a minor, I don't understand what's going on with the nursery car park in 1029. So basically, it's being regularized, it's somehow temporary. Is it also, is there a new access being made that punches a hole through that wall? I'm a bit confused about that. And there was lots of sort of questions and things, certainly from members of the public, around sort of groundwater and hydrology and stuff. So I now know what the difference between an attenuation and an infiltration tanks, and that's exciting. But so when it comes to groundwater displacement, does that only matter in a flood zone? Which I guess this is clearly not. So that's that kind of question. So yeah, nursery car park, don't understand. And yeah, that.
Yeah, so firstly, in relation to the car park, as we could see in the photos, if we just quickly go back to those, there's this very informal large area which serves as a nursery car park. The nursery is currently under a temporary permission. It's my understanding that the university might wish to seek a permanent retention of that. But it doesn't currently benefit from permanent planning permission. So they're proposing to rationalise this area, which would effectively result in a reduction in parking in this area. But we have recommended a condition that it is temporary because the nursery doesn't have permanent planning permission. So if an application came forward for the nursery to retain it on a permanent basis, then that would have to include that car park area to decide also what happens with that in the long term. And the outline planning application, there is currently a hole in the wall providing vehicular access to this part of the site. It was indicated on the outline that that would be retained, and it would be more of a drop-off area without parking. So that would have to be considered if it was proposed to retain that car park and the nursery in the future. And kind of discussions around the suitability and proximity, whether the nursery needs parking there. But yeah, that's so in relation to drainage and hydrology, so sorry, can you, what were the? Oh.
Okay. It's when it comes to groundwater displacement, is that only a consideration inside a flood zone? Because of the basements and things.
Yeah, so in relation to groundwater displacement, obviously that's a consideration anywhere if it could lead to flood risk. The main thing to consider with this application is that that was all considered under the original outline planning application. And also there was an outline drainage strategy that was approved as part of the outline application, and this plot will need to feed into that already approved wider drainage strategy. But yeah, on the whole, it's the kind of thing that we would be looking at everywhere as to whether that's suitable.
Just to clarify as well, on certain representations that have been made, this is an outline application. Sorry, the outline application is the kind of host application. And this effectively is an application to discharge conditions on that outline. So what, you know, it isn't correct to say the outline application isn't relevant because it sets the condition and the parameters for this application to come forward. And so basements were quite clearly shown on the parameter plans there. So it was known that the basements were coming forward, and the work that was done in terms of the interim drainage strategies as part of that overall outline application considered that aspect, including things like groundwater.
Okay. Other questions? Can I just ask a question about staff numbers? Am I right in thinking that this building would simply consolidate existing staff in one place rather than increase numbers? That's probably one for the applicants rather than, yeah.
Yeah, to an extent, yes. The numbers are 456 people in this building, 9,700 square meters. As you know, university is very dependent on outside funding to employ staff. So yes, it'd be wonderful to think the numbers would go up enormously, but they won't. And there will be some movement over time of people from where we are in the Old Road Campus Research Building, as it's called, across the road. So hopefully some small expansion, but not enormous.
Thank you, that's helpful. Other questions? I can't see any. Shall we move into comments then?
Ejaz and then Jemima.
Thank you, Chair. So I mean, I like the application. It's something that we need. I think everything's good for it. Just noticeable with the other applications that we had earlier, I know that the flues and stuff are sort of going between 4 and 4.5 meters above what was allowed, and we've had that on Botley as well. So it's just kind of thing that not this particular application is a concern, but there is a concern that we're kind of just stretching the height of everything. I understand about density, and that is just something that I wanted to highlight really. But apart from that, we need it. Thank you for it. And hopefully that we can all support it.
Yeah, I was going to say what a welcome application it is in the light, particularly of reading what's happening in the USA at the moment. And I wondered if manufacturing is actually happening on site. Is that something that you're going to be? Yeah.
Depends how you define the site. We're very lucky in that we're one of the very, very, very few universities in the world that has its own, we call it a clinical biomanufacturing facility. It's actually across the road on the Churchill site. It's been there for 20 or 30 years. But that was where the first doses of the COVID vaccine were made and allowed us to start in early April rather than a couple of months later, because all the suitable facilities around the world were rather booked at the time. So yes, we do have manufacturing, but not at grand scale. And there are ongoing discussions about larger manufacturing facilities.
Just to say that's a question, and we just moved to debate, so just to sort of bring it back to debate around the application rather than questioning the applicant.
Alex.
Well, as neither of the first two speakers have quite yet said that they are supporting a recommendation for approval, I will. So I recommend approval. Was there any conditions, additions? Don't think so. No, in that case, as written, please.
So right, have a proposal on the table to approve this application with the conditions as set out in the report and no additional ones. Can I see all those in favour of the application? That's unanimous. Excellent. Thank you, and wish you all the best with that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just want to go, sorry, just want to go back to my discussion about whether I've got a potential interest in the next item or not. Obviously, it's a follow-up of reserved matters from the outline application from 2023, when I did declare an interest because I've been involved in that planning application discussions as a cabinet member up until May 2023. I haven't had any discussions since May 2023. So I am assuming that whatever it is that is in front of us as an application is not anything that I know about, see what I mean? But is that something that is potentially perceived as a problem, and should I withdraw? Yeah, it's a new application. It's the reserved matters essentially, isn't it? Yeah. The Blackbird Leys Community Centre. It's because it's referring to the outline application, obviously, which runs before it, which I did declare an interest at, because by that time I'd had lots of engagement in that application, not this one. I don't think so, so I'm kind of going on your advice, so yeah, okay.
View with the planning lawyer, the same issue. I mean, the issue is that cabinet members see programs in broad high level. They don't actually look at the planning application in a cabinet setting. They don't go through the detail of, the height, the width, the size, the car parking, the whatever. So does that mean you're comfortable that while as a cabinet member you may have approved in principle the creation of a community centre in Blackbird Leys, you haven't opined about the merits of the particular scheme, and therefore it's perfectly acceptable to stay?
You have to look at each case on its merits and what your particular involvement was at cabinet. So there's not an agenda that I've answered. You need to see how.
Also being involved in detail like I was on the previous one, but not on this one.
I don't feel I was involved in detail, so I'm happy to stay.
Over to Nia George to present. Thank you, Nia.
Right, before I start, so I've got one verbal update for the planning committee. So the wording of condition 20 within the officer report, which relates to the hours of use of the community centre, should have stated explicitly the hours of 7 AM to 11 PM. So this is a reserved matters application seeking plan permission for the erection of a community centre and public open space on a parcel of land located along and to the east of Blackbird Leys Road, situated within the Blackbird Leys district centre area. So the site comprises a parcel of land, and you've got to the north of the Holy Family Church, the west of Blackbird Leys Adventure Playground, south of the Blackbird Public House, and the site also includes the eastern part of Blackbird Leys Road itself. So outline planning permission has already been granted on the site for the provision of a community centre with public open space, with all matters reserved except for the principal means of access, which has already been approved, and also approved within the immediate context of the site as part of the wider regeneration project in Blackbird Leys is a new residential tower block with retail units at ground floor, known as Block A, which will be located immediately to the northwest of the site in this area here. The Holy Family Church to the south of the site down here is grade 2 listed. Church has been given a resolution to grant planning permission and listed building consent for its demolition and redevelopment. However, permission has not been granted yet due to the legal agreement having not been completed. So this is a view from Blackbird Leys Road looking north with Windrush Tower to the left and the Blackbird Public House on the right. Location is where the outer square public space would start at its northern point. This is another view from Blackbird Leys Road looking east of the Blackbird Public House again on the left and the site for the community centre to the right. This is another view from Blackbird Leys Road looking directly at the site for the centre and the inner square. In the background you can see the existing swimming pool, the brick building. That's already got permission to be demolished and the community centre would sit in that location. This is a view on the western side of Blackbird Leys Road, looking towards the south where the outer square would be located in the foreground. And on the right-hand side, you can see works being undertaken where wider landscaping improvements have already been approved under the wider regeneration of the area. This is a view just to the north of the Holy Family Church, looking east, where you can see the southern boundary of the site where the inner square would be located, with the community centre proposed just to sit behind. This is a view to the south of the road, looking north, where again the outer square would be located here. This is a view from Blackbird Leys Road, again at the north, where the outer square would be located looking west, and the buildings on the left-hand side have also been granted permission for demolition and to be replaced with 2 residential blocks, again part of the wider regeneration of the area. This view from Moorbank to the north of the site, the community centre would be located in this location here. And this is view from the entrance to the Mabel Pritchard School located to the east. Again, you can see the building here in the foreground of Windrush Tower, and the building just here, that is the Blackbird Leys Adventure Playground. This is a view from Cuddesdon Way to the south of the site, looking north, where the community centre would be located just behind this green space. And this is just another view, a wider view with Windrush Tower in the background. So this is the proposed site plan. The community centre would be proposed to the northeast, the inner square to just the southwest of this, and the outer square spanning Blackbird Leys Road itself. And to the north of the inner square again is where the Block A tower has already been approved. These are the proposed floor plans for the community centre. So at ground floor level, this includes community hall, a community garden at the rear of the building. At first floor, you've got another hall with some offices and a covered balcony to the front. Second floor plan, you've got the largest hall at the back and then more office space to the front. And on the left is just a section of the building. These are the roof plans, which show there's plant and solar panels on the roof. And these are the elevations. So you've got the front elevation, the sides on the right-hand side, and the rear on the bottom left. The materials are a mixture of dark grey brick with perforated aluminium panels to the top and contrasting yellow and green fenestration. This is a landscaping plan showing at the top the community garden to the rear of the centre, which provides a link to the Blackbird Leys Adventure Playground. And to the left, you've got a delivery and turning area with the community centre entrance and breakout space just to the south of the building. So in the inner square, in the middle, you've got community stage and lawns with seating areas and bicycle storage and a rain garden and mural wall to the right. And to the bottom, then you have the outer square with the glow tree located in the middle with some pockets of play areas to the bottom right of this. And then you've got a dedicated cycle lane to the south of the site and some bollards which will restrict vehicle access all along the south in these locations. This is a section of the landscaping proposals. The top is looking northeast with the community centre in the background with block A on the left, and the bottom is looking from the south of the site with the outer square to the left and the inner square to the right. And then lastly, these are just some more finer details of some of the landscaping. So on the top, you've got the deck stage, which is going to be in the inner square. And at the bottom, a visual of the play wall and the seating area, which would be in the outer square. So overall, the proposed development is considered to be acceptable. The community centre and public open space would meet the requirements of the relevant conditions attached to the outline planning permission and overall be considered of a high quality design. Proposals would result in a moderate level of less than substantial harm upon the setting of the Grade 2 listed Holy Family Church. However, the public benefits of the scheme are considered to outweigh and justify the harm identified. Proposals would be considered acceptable in relation to their impact upon neighbouring occupiers of the site, and the proposal would not trigger any detrimental highway safety concerns. The scheme would not give rise to any associated impacts associated with health, well-being and safety, drainage, biodiversity, and will not cause any harm to existing trees. The proposals would deliver a high-quality landscape with areas of play, as well as highly sustainable building in relation to its design and construction. And in addition, the scheme would not result in any concerns relating to land quality nor archaeology. So subject to recommended conditions and informatives, the proposals are considered to comply with the relevant policies of the Oxford Local Plan and the NPPF.
Thank you, Nia. And we have 3 speakers in favour of the application. Would you like to come forward, please? You have five minutes altogether. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try and make it a little bit quicker for you all. So firstly, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening about this incredibly important project in the heart of Blackbird Leys. My name's Lena Brodetsky. I'm Delivery Director at Peabody, and I'm joined by Caroline from Oxford City Council and also Rebecca from Savills, who's our planning consultant. The project's being delivered in partnership as part of a development agreement between Peabody and Oxford City Council. Peabody will be delivering the building alongside the residential development that was approved in full, as part of the hybrid planning approval back in 2023. So Oxford City Council, they'll manage the community centre, whilst Peabody will manage the public realm open space. So the delivery of the community space is really a critical part of the wider regeneration of the area. This application follows a grant to the hybrid planning application in October 2023. The community centre and associated public open space was originally granted in outline, as we felt that we needed more time to consult with the community before the detailed design was submitted for approval. So this enabled us to meet the community's aspirations for the building and also took them along on the journey to achieve an agreed design, given that it was essentially going to be their building. This reserve matters application has been a lot of extensive engagement with the community of Blackbird Leys and also Greater Leys and stakeholders between 2023 and submission in October 24. The recommendation for approval is also as a result of positive engagement with officers as part of the pre-app process and the reserve matters application. The reason for this application coming forward as a reserve matters application again was to ensure that it was designed in a way that will meet the needs of the community and for generations to come. The project held over 40 public events and engaged over 1,000 people in person. A community review panel was set up and the communication strategy reached over 10,000 people. So local residents, Oxford City councillors, staff and the Oxford Design Review Panel have provided really positive feedback on the engagement approach. Information gathered throughout the process was continually fed back to the design team, ensuring genuine integration of community feedback into the design development. And this has ensured that the proposals will truly meet the needs of the community and also making sure that it's high quality design, inclusive, sustainable and multifunctional. The building will be a distinctive landmark for Blackbird Leys at the heart of the community, and the entrance of the building has been designed to be warm and welcoming to everyone in the community. The public realm has also been designed to be a flexible and multifunctional space. A variety of areas of play for different age groups are included throughout the open space, as are the areas of seating for all ages. The Glow Tree, which is a celebrated piece of local artwork, and the local community are very protective of it, understandably, will continue to be a key focal point for the space in front of the community centre. And there will also be further opportunities for local artwork within the open space and on the building itself. So the design of the building has been driven by sustainability and energy principles. The design meets the government nearly zero energy building requirements for new public building, and the building will secure around an 80% reduction in regulated carbon emissions, which is on track to meet a BREEAM Excellent rating. So elements such as parking and servicing were previously approved in detail as part of the hybrid consent, and the public open space includes an extensive amount of cycle parking for visitors of the community centre, retail units and also Block A, which is the block closest to the community centre. And that's in line with the council's cycle parking standards. So if approved today, we anticipate the construction would start in autumn 2025. So we feel this project is a fantastic example of working in partnership to support vital regeneration at Blackbird Leys. The proposals submitted have been informed by extensive consultation to ensure the building and open space is inclusive, multifunctional, sustainable and of high quality design. And we hope you will support the officer's recommendation for approval to ensure this community centre is delivered alongside the adjacent housing and retail units. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, questions? Anybody? Alex?
Yeah, sorry, it's actually about what the slide that's up there about the landscaping and the kind of raised platformy stagey thing. Just want to make sure that I understand what our scope is as a planning decision maker to take into account things like I don't know, the maintenance ability of the applicants look after something like that and the trees and planting. I'm assuming it's fairly limited. So it might be a question to the applicant, are you going to look after all this stuff? But it'd just be helpful just to get a input on that as a, you know, to what extent is it a genuine material consideration? And then I'm aiming the question over there.
So in the process of reviewing the landscaping and including the play equipment which is being used, we've been in consultation with our own green and blue infrastructure manager, and we've been looking at the quality of the materials and how long they would likely last, to ensure that they're not having to continually upkeep maintenance. So that has been something which we've considered in the process, although we haven't yet strictly applied a condition for them to be maintained at a regular interval. I don't know if the applicant wants to comment.
Thank you, that's reassuring, but if the applicant wishes to comment or not, as the case may be.
Happy to. So as part of the public realm design, we also consulted with our estate services team who will be managing that space. They are incredibly keen on making sure, one, they can maintain it in perpetuity, and the costs associated with maintaining it are limited, to make sure that any service charges, etc., are kept to a minimum. So that has definitely been a consideration throughout.
David, did you have a question?
Observation, really. Couple of points, Chair. I'm just trying to see how you get a disabled person to the top floor, because I don't see a lift. I don't know if there is a lift.
The applicants are nodding and saying there is a lift.
There is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Nia, do you want to confirm?
Brilliant. No problem. And the absence of storage space for long-term lets. That's all. I mean, it's not a planning matter, but it's just an observation.
I don't know who wants to, if anyone, it would just be quite helpful just to have confirmation on the storage space. David, can you turn your mic off, please?
Sorry, so the question was, are we providing long-term storage to the tenancies?
Some storage for you know, for community groups which have quite a lot of kit, you know.
Yeah, so the dark grey spaces are storage, although you can see some of them are in sort of the more shared spaces, which is the light green. In terms of the tenancies, which are the pink reddish spaces, we're providing just a bare carpet and painted walls kind of space that then the tenants can move in and have their own storage. So there won't be built-in joinery storage for the tenancies. But in terms of the storage required for, say, the halls, which are the blue spaces, and other spaces that might be run by community groups or the council, we have really pushed as far as we could with our architects to give us as much storage as we can. And that means tables and chairs and any other equipment that may be needed for uses. So we have considered that, and those are the grey and dark grey spaces.
Okay. Other questions, Anna?
Yeah, so it's very welcome to finally see the details of this. I also just wanted to take the time to kind of commend you for the amount of people you've engaged with over it. I think, like, genuinely that was a pretty heroic level of effort. So my questions are largely around, so there's a very specific one around 10.101 in the report, which is around the use of car club bays for parking for the community centre. The question there is, like, how would that even work? And a sort of wider point, if you flip to the landscape plan, which I've got on like 139, yeah, that one. I guess, so you mentioned some bollards, I guess, around the southern end. I think I can see some very small dots, like there's one near the 9. So, you know, the existing site has literally like an entire line of concrete bollards there, which, you know, they're not there by accident. Are they basically also going to be there? Similarly, what's to stop people, what's between the boundaries of 2 and 3 up there, the sort of the grey to the white, like what's to stop people just parking in 2 and then downwards? So it's really about, yeah, the sort of wider question is, like, how are you preventing vehicle access to the public realm, essentially. And then the sort of minor point around the car club parking space, which didn't really make sense to me. Thank you.
So the all of the parking for the application was already considered in the outline permission application, and the highways were happy with the levels of parking that have come through. In terms of the bollards, so I will try and point out, so there is a bollard basically on each of the entrances around the outer square. So you've got one just to, there we go, it's working. So you've got one just to the south of block A there, another one here, 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 and here, and some of them are rising bollards that can come up and down. In terms of the space between 2 and 3, now 3 is outside of the application site area, but that is a service area for block A. And where 2 is, that is a turning and delivery area, so that vehicles can turn around and maneuver out. Whilst there would be no bollards to prevent somebody to park there, presumably there would be, management to prevent somebody parking in that area, because it's going to be for turning and delivery. There's a delivery and service plan under the hybrid application, which has already been approved as well.
Happy with that?
I guess we'll see.
Before we move on, I just want to ask members of the committee if they're willing to suspend standing orders to complete the agenda, because we're supposed to finish at 9 and we've got one agenda item after this. Otherwise, we have to come back on another day. Okay, is everyone happy to do that? Thank you. Okay, thank you. Nigel, you had a question.
I wanted to pursue the issue of the community consultation a bit more, which was very thorough. And in your report, you get feedback about the nature of the building people wanted, which was a welcome and recognisable, interesting building. Did you show the community the designs that you had in mind, and particularly the colour schemes with the yellow, the black, and the green, the so-called Blackbird colours? Did you give them that level of detail? And what was the reaction to that? Because it's not. Yeah, I'd like to know a bit more about what the reaction was.
I'll take that one. Sure. So we had consultants with us. Like I said, we had a design review panel made up of representatives of the community who chose to join this review panel. Their job, as it were, was to review the design at different stages. We also took the design to several different events at different stages, including iterations of designs, so brick cladding, different colors, different shapes, different finishes. And at one point, I do remember we had one of the events was in a youth sort of night where we actually got them to sort of pick which ones they like more and almost tally what got more support. And we did that in various different events. So in a way, trying to ascertain what had more support at the, sort of even the more granular level of like I said, finishes and colors, which can vary and is as subjective in many ways. So yes, we did.
Yeah.
Jack, can I just jump in the interest of time, because obviously time is ticking. Can we just limit questions to planning related ones that we can deal with? And I'll just ask the question, is there a planning related point to the question that we can maybe help you with? Sorry, I tried to put it as tactfully as possible.
No, it's very tactful of you, but there isn't particularly a planning related issue. What I'm trying to get confidence in is the consultation, which is mentioned in the documents, being rather important, was robust, and it's not likely to, when we built this building in this way, it's not likely to suddenly discover that lots and lots of people absolutely hate it. So I'm given some assurance that you know that is actually not likely to happen. And given it's such an iconic and important building in this estate, that's why I'm asking the question. Okay.
Anna.
I'm sorry, it is gone past 9 p.m, but I'm going to slightly labour this point slightly harder. So I guess I'm, looking at this diagram up here, I'm not convinced that, how are we going to stop people parking on, say, that bottom right-hand corner? How are we going to stop people parking on the segregated cycle path? I mean, if you currently look at this site on Google Street View, like every single bit of pavement is currently parked on. So I don't have a huge amount of confidence that a sort of laissez-faire thing here is going to work. I mean, I think if that, a dropped curb into a nice bit of tarmac is probably going to be parked on. And I think we would be mindful to try and mitigate that a bit harder. Because I think, the bollards that are on here, that are fine, but I genuinely don't think it's enough actually. And I think there'll be quite a lot of overspill parking on this.
Okay, thank you. Is that like a sort of comment? Have we got any more questions, or do we move into discussion? Diane? Yes, sorry. Wait a minute. Yeah, near.
Yeah, so on the south of the site, so in the pink shading is a cycleway, and that's segregated away from the highway. So it's labelled as number 18 on the plans. Those are parking bays on the road, and then you've got an avenue of trees here, and then the cycleway behind that. So then you wouldn't have cars going over into that.
But you can from the bottom corner. So
Where the cycle track meets the road.
yeah, exactly. Wherever there is a junction, you can get on. I mean, you see this on Cowley Road, right? There is literally parking bays on Cowley Road, but people drive up the pedestrian crossing and park on the paving. So, there's nothing to stop people doing that here. And that's a genuine concern, because I think, I think it would just basically like a condition of slightly more bollards.
I would also say it's nothing to say they will do that either. And if you're talking in the bottom corner, is that around the junction here where you've got the two zebra crossings?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, they're the two main junctions at this crossroads. So, the idea that you might get ad hoc parking in and around there, again, the design of the space is quite clearly an area where it's pedestrian space. You've got parking bays along the line here where you've got number 18 effectively. So I think you just have to treat the design of the road layout, etc., was going to hopefully sort of deal with that point. I'm not entirely convinced that the concern that's being flagged about ad hoc parking in and around that corner, where you've got two zebra crossings quite clearly joining each other, is going to attract people to park in that location. That was just my view, but I think that's all covered as part of the overall outlines application.
Alex, did you want to?
Yes, I was going to ask about the planning application I wasn't at in 2023, which was where I had to declare an interest. But are not those cycleways things which have already been agreed, including their precise positioning and the precise bollards? And the subsequent and related question would be, if after construction it transpired that an additional bollard was required, would that require a planning permission because of a variation to the landscaping? That seems unlikely, and therefore it would just be a matter of administration. Was my two questions.
Any questions?
Yes to all of those questions, I think.
Yes,
the answer.
to all of them. Do you want to come in?
I mean, it was just a condition about more bollards, just to actually emphasise what's needed. When you look at historic LTNs around wherever, whatever side street you look at, historic LTNs have got rows and rows and rows of bollards which are worth reviewing. And I would say a condition that more bollards are introduced here would, I think, as Councillor Railton has said, be very, very wise, given what we know of parking, paving.
we've got conditions that relate to street furniture. We'll put a note.
Yeah.
We've taken that away. We hear what you say. We do hear what you're saying. I don't mean to downplay what was being suggested. But we have got to trust that the road layout's been designed in such a way that will kind of prevent some of that happening. But we have got conditions on street furniture, which we can take that into account, and we've heard what you're saying.
Diane, do you have a question?
Yes, yes, it's a question. I'm interested in hearing a bit more about security and what emerged from the consultations and how questions around the community's safety when they're using the space and in and around the space has been taken into consideration.
Yep. Yes, so in the consultation process, we undertook consultation with Thames Valley Police and our own community safety team. Some of the comments related to both inside the community centre as well as outside in the public realm. One of the comments was indeed the bollards, actually, because initially they weren't there, so they were suggested by Thames Valley Police in those locations. The lighting and the CCTV was a large concern by both, but we've discussed that can be agreed under condition. Inside the community centre, there was a concern originally that members of the public could go up onto roof level without there being a secure door at the top of the second floor, and that's now been installed as per the revised floor plans. And there was also some concerns with the landscaping and how some surfaces may attract skateboarding. So the landscaping is being developed so that there are no flat surfaces which will try and deter skateboarding. And it was also looked into the arrangement of the seating layout as well, and where that would be located in relation to Block A as well. So hopefully that addresses.
Thank you. Any other questions? Comments? Alex?
David was quicker than me. I'll be very brief. I think obviously there's been an outline application which has established the principle. This is the detail. We've heard that there has been really extensive effort to meet detailed points being made by residents, community groups, all sorts of people. There is the issue which officers have agreed to take on about the bollards, and it was interesting to reflect on the fact that was raised actively by the police, and I quite understand why. You know, not least given the history of this exact location and whatever. So, you know, it's bound to be on their list of things to worry about. So on that basis, I would like to move approval. Colour choice probably wouldn't have been mine, but it's not my choice. That's not the point. The point is it's one that the applicant, on the basis of their consultation, has chosen. And so there we go. So on that basis, I am very happy to recommend approval. Did we have an additional condition in this one?
Bollard.
Oh yeah, no, that's a note about bollards, plus the note about bollards on as Mr. Murdoch outlined in considerable detail. Whatever he said, I agree with it. So that's it.
And David, were you seconded? Great. Okay, so we have proposal on the table to accept the application with a note on extra bollards. All those in favour of the application? That's unanimous. Thank you. And now we move on to item 10. Is Shona on virtual? And I will leave briefly. So Lawrence, you have, because I accused myself for the first. Lawrence, it probably makes sense for you just to
Okay. We're all ready? Let's begin. Could I go over to Shona and ask her to take us through the OHAR report?
Great, thank you. Good evening, councillors. So I'm here today to present the latest round of Oxford Heritage Asset Register nominations. So I'll give a small introduction for those who don't know. The OHAR is a register of buildings, structures, features, or places within Oxford located outside of conservation areas, which are considered to make a special contribution to the character of Oxford and its neighbourhoods through their locally significant historic, architectural, archaeological, or artistic interest. So the register, known as OHAR for short, was developed between 2012 and 2015 with funding from Historic England in partnership with OPT, Oxford Preservation Trust, and local communities. And its purpose is to provide the opportunity to members of the community to identify those elements of the city's historic environment that they value, which, as well as raising the profile of these buildings and places, allows us to better protect and manage them through planning policies and decisions. So being included on the OHAR places no additional legal requirements or responsibilities on property owners over and above those already required for planning permission or building regulations approval. It can help to conserve and enhance local character, as inclusion on the OHAR helps to identify buildings as local heritage assets, which are a material consideration in planning decisions. So to be included on the OHAR, the building, place, structure, feature, etc., must meet 4 criteria. So firstly, it must be capable of meeting the government's definition as a heritage asset. Secondly, it must possess heritage interests that can be conserved and enjoyed. Thirdly, it must have value as heritage for the character and identity of the City of Oxford, its neighbourhoods and its communities, beyond personal interest. And lastly, it must have a level of significance which is beyond the general identified character of the local area. So today we have 9 assets in total which have been nominated for inclusion on the OHAR. They are nominations which we've received between November 2021, when assets were last added to the register, and December of 2024. These comprise 7 nominations made by members of the public and various interest groups, and 2 nominations made by officers. And Appendix A sets out what those are and details the recommendations and reasons for adding them to the register. In line with due process, we undertook public consultation on these nominations between the 20th of January and the 16th of February 2025. We had 128 responses in total, and the findings of these responses are summarised in Appendix A, although I won't go through them in full because we all want to get home at some point soon. Following the closure of the public consultation, I reviewed the responses, both from members of the public and owners of the assets, and then I assessed the assets against the full criteria, and a summary of my findings are again included in Appendix A. I consider that all 9 nominated assets meet the required criteria, and my recommendation is therefore that all are approved for addition to the register. So I have photos here of the 9 assets, which I'll just quickly go through briefly. So firstly, we have New Marston Meadows. And it should be noted with this application, following public consultation, there was a couple of small changes to the boundary which were made, which are in Appendix B and C. Millenford School. And then there's St Andrew's Church of England Primary School on London Road in Headington. There is Tumbling Bay Bathing Place in Botley. Slade Camp in Headington. The Kilns and Lewis Close in Headington. The Parish Church of St Mary on Bayswater Road. Longbridge's Bathing Place. And finally, Henry and Joyce Collins's Oxford Mural. And that is everything from me.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was just clarifying the procedure to be followed on this. What I think we have to do is take them all individually and vote to approve or to reject them.
Unless.
Sorry, Chair, or Vice Chair, Chair, now you're in charge. I had a very brief question and I could throw in a comment for interest, those like history. So I just wanted to clarification on the Meadows maps, because there are a sequence of maps and I want to be absolutely clear which of those variations we're being asked to approve. That would be helpful. The comment is, it's quite interesting to see two of these with a councillor overlap. My fellow ward councillor, when I was a councillor in Barton, helped to build that church. He was one of the group of people from residents who contributed to it. And I think I am right. We have a former Lord Mayor who lived in the Slade site when it was family accommodation for people who'd lost their homes in London and found herself there and ended up being mayor of this city, which is quite impressive. Anyway, with that, I shall be quiet.
With regard to the boundary, just to confirm, so I've put Appendix B and C. C is a bit less well defined because I just wanted, that was created by me, but it's not as clear, but it's just to show where the boundary is and which pits are being added and taken away. The one that you should look at is the Appendix B, yeah, the one that's just highlighting.
Has anybody got any other questions on any of the 9 subjects? No. In that case, can I have a proposal to approve the following nominations? Right. Thank you, Alex. And seconding? Right, thank you. Sorry, all those in favour? I think that's unanimous. Therefore, the nominations have been approved. Thank you. So could I see all those in favour of recommending the approval of the minutes of that meeting? Thank you, that's unanimous. So the meeting has finished.